a vibrant and loving young mother.
She was just an awesome person. She had a little feisty side to her because of the redhead, but she was always looking out for everybody else.
Is found savagely murdered inside an office building washroom.
There was insulated electrical wire used to strangle her.
It appeared that there had been a sexual assault.
Detectives pursue multiple suspects.
There were problems with the marriage. They had had issues. They had been arguing.
He was in the building the night she was killed. His prints matched the prints inside the bathroom stall.
And hunt down an elusive killer.
We talked to the attorney, who states that he is probably somewhere in South America.
I said, okay, where's he at? Can we get him?
That no one could have imagined.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe it.
It was very unexpected to see him as the actual killer.
Known for its live music scene, Austin, Texas is also one of the safest big cities in the country.
Austin's kind of one of those cool vibe cities, and it's just a very good mix of people.
There's a lot of green belts and parks and creeks and trails. It's a really neat place to live. Austin has not had the kind of crime and the volume of crime as other large cities. People do typically feel safe.
But in 1983, the town is rocked when a local businessman makes a gruesome discovery.
In the early morning hours of September 20th, 1983, the Austin Police Department received a 911 call. One of the tenants of an office complex had come in the morning and discovered things were out of place. There was a cleaning cart out in the hallway, so he went to try to find out if anyone else was still in the building. He did discover a deceased female in the upstairs men's restroom.
The 911 caller did not know her name, but he recognized her as the woman who did clean the building.
Police are dispatched to the scene.
When we located the female victim in the men's restroom, she was positioned inside of the stall.
She was undressed. There was insulated electrical wire that had small loops tied on the ends of them. Detectives believed that electrical wire was used to strangle her and be the cause of her death. It appeared, because she had no defensive wounds at all, that the killer came up from behind and surprised her.
Everything in the crime scene suggested that this was a violent attack.
There was wet toilet paper inside of her nose and her mouth. It stands to reason the killer put that in her mouth and her nose after he strangled her to ensure that she was good and dead.
There was a bodily fluid and a clothing that made it appear as if she was drug across the floor. Her clothes were scattered amongst the restroom, and it appeared that there had been a sexual assault. The victim was identified by an ID that was found inside of her purse. She was Lori Stout, a 22-year-old female from Austin.
While forensics collect samples, investigators look for other evidence left behind by the killer.
A significant fingerprint was located in the men's stall of the restroom.
When dragging her in there, a person would almost have to brace themselves on the wall of the inside of the stall. The print inside the bathroom stall matched a print on the second floor fire escape. So the two of those were pretty significant.
Had the killer fled through the fire escape after committing the murder? Detectives head down to the parking lot looking for more clues.
They found that there was a spool that was used for insulated electrical wiring inside the dumpster. They also found some looser pieces of the same type of wiring that was used to kill the victim.
Detectives bag the items for analysis. Back inside, police start piecing together a theory of who could have committed this horrible act.
The fact that the victim was killed inside the building in the middle of the night suggested that whoever did this had access or a key to get in it.
Detectives canvass the building and talk to employees, but determined that no one had seen anything suspicious.
We were able to talk with two witnesses that saw Lori at about 12:30 a.m. as they locked up and secured the building and left.
We know that she was last seen alive around 12:30 in the morning, and the employee at the building discovered her body around 8 a.m. So she died sometime during that time frame.
Just as investigators are finishing up, a frantic man arrives at the scene. He identifies himself as Gary Stout and demands to know where his wife Lori is.
Gary Stout told detectives he woke up that morning and discovered that his wife was not home yet from work. He got worried and he drove up to the building, which was a short distance away, and discovered her car still in the parking lot, but it was surrounded by numerous police cars. It was at that point that the police spoke with him and broke the news that his wife was found dead.
He was obviously traumatized by what had happened.
As police take Gary down to the station for questioning, the devastating news soon spreads to the rest of Lori's family.
I was in shock. I couldn't believe it. My whole world changed. I no longer had my confidant, no longer had my best friend. It was horrible, horrible.
When we found out that Lori had been killed, it was a big impact. It was overwhelming.
Born in Arlington, Virginia in 1960, Lori Coffey was a naturally warm and caring soul.
Lori was the oldest of Lori, myself, and TJ, but she was kind of the mother hen of us all. She had a little feisty side to her, and I think maybe because of the redhead, but she was always looking out for everybody else. She was just an awesome person. She really, truly was.
Lori was the leader of us three musketeers, me, Beverly, and Lori. And she kept us going.
After moving to Austin with her mother and siblings, in 1977, Lori met Gary Stout, who worked logistics for the military.
It all flourished very fast. She was so giddy about Gary, and they fell in love. All in all, he just seemed like a good guy, so we were all, okay, so this is it.
After a whirlwind courtship, Lori and Gary married the following year. 3 years later, Lori became pregnant.
She was over the moon, very, very happy. I mean, that's what she wanted. She wanted to be married, start having a family, and she was on her way.
But Lori is soon forced to face the harsh realities of military family life.
Gary got orders to go to Belgium. She was very sad. Lori was sad that Gary was gone overseas, and here she was facing having a baby on her own at home.
On January 26, 1982, while Gary is away, Lori gives birth to a baby girl.
Lori had a really easy labor, and, now we have this little baby, and, of course, she was ecstatic.
I think that she very much enjoyed being a mother. I think that she experienced probably the happiest months of her life after I was born.
In order to spend more time with his family, Gary left the military and took a job as a maintenance worker in the same building where Lori worked nights as a cleaner.
She was very excited that he was coming home. That's all she wanted, just to be a mom and wife, homemaker.
With her life finally on track, how did this loving young mother become the victim of a cold-blooded killer?
As with any investigation, you have to look at those that are closest to the victim and those that have motive. As an employee of the building, a maintenance worker there, Gary had access.
Down at the station, police questioned Gary about his marriage to Lori.
When we asked him about any problems in their relationship, he quickly admitted that they had had issues, they had been arguing, and were unhappy.
Detectives discovered that Lori actually went and stayed with her sister, Beverly, shortly before the murder happened because of a really big argument that she had with Gary.
Things were not going all that well for her and Gary, and she was miserable.
This definitely created a concern that there were problems with the marriage. So knowing that he has access and motive, it raises the level of suspicion that he could have been involved in this crime.
Coming up, detectives uncover disturbing secrets.
He wasn't happy in his relationship, and he admitted that he was looking at leaving her.
Lori's family felt very strongly that he was the killer.
Before a shocking tip takes police in a whole new direction.
We received information from a female victim of a man that committed a similar attack against her.
This is a big turning point in the investigation.
Could this be a serial rapist? Could it be a serial murder?
And has detectives risking it all to catch a killer.
He knew it was going to have to be something big for us to find him.
We were holding our breath. We weren't sure it was going to happen.
Police investigating the murder of 22-year-old mother Lori Stout are questioning their first suspect, her husband Gary.
When Gary was being interviewed, he was very forthcoming about the poor state of his marriage with Lori. So it was a little bit of a red flag.
At this point in the investigation, we need additional information about problems that may be in their relationship.
Lori and Gary were happy. When they first got married, she was proud to be a wife. That's all she wanted.
But things changed when Gary returned from overseas.
Lori wanted it to just be like it was before he left, and unfortunately that was not the case.
So knowing the family's account of their relationship as well, knowing that it was a volatile relationship, that created concern that he could have been frustrated with Lori and committed this type of act.
When detectives press Gary for details about why his marriage was falling apart, he makes an alarming confession.
He admitted that he had actually had an affair and was looking at leaving Lori.
Gary tells detectives that he met a woman while overseas and that she had since come to visit him in Austin.
At this point, the detectives are wondering, does Gary want Lori out of the picture given the very bad state of their marriage and the fact that he wants to be with this woman he's having an affair with?
Gary explains that he ultimately chose to stay with Lori, but detectives become even more suspicious after they ask him for an alibi.
He stated that the night before, he and Lori had an argument, so she went and slept on the couch. At one point, she finally just got up in the early morning hours, went to work. Gary did not have an alibi that we could confirm. He was at home with the young child, asleep. He could have left his house, gone up to the building, and come back. That would not be something we could verify.
So the marital difficulties, and now we've got a big fight, and Gary having access to the building. He's somebody that they're looking at pretty hard.
Detectives ask Gary to provide samples of his blood and fingerprints to be compared with evidence found at the crime scene.
He was cooperative with us. He provided samples that were requested.
Looking further into Gary's movements leading up to the murder, investigators reach out to his boss at the office building.
The manager of the building informed the detectives that Gary had fixed a water heater the day before Lori was killed. And he used the same type of electrical wiring that was used to kill Lori.
This was another extremely big flag in the case. All these things together really raised the suspicion that this is the guy.
As police wait for forensic testing results, Lori's autopsy report comes in.
Lori's cause of death was in fact strangulation, and that seemed to match the ligature found at the scene.
What was determined is that a sexual assault had taken place.
They were able to get a sample of semen. However, this is 1983, so there was no DNA testing available. In order to do any comparison, we used blood type antigens. This kind of evidence is helpful in narrowing down the field of suspects.
When we found out how Lori was actually killed, it was disturbing. First thought to my mind, one sick individual. One very sick individual that did it.
Pure evil. Absolute pure evil.
Detectives eagerly receive the results of Gary's fingerprints and blood tests, but they are far from conclusive.
Gary's fingerprints did not match the one inside the stall, but did match prints in the building. But he has access to the building and he is working there. His blood type, it matches the type found in the semen. But of course, Gary is married to Lori, so it's another piece of evidence that can go both ways.
Ultimately, we couldn't use fingerprints or any blood work to exclude him.
Running out of options, detectives try one last method to get to the truth.
Gary Stout was provided an opportunity to take a polygraph. During that interview, he was asked if he was responsible for the murder of Lori, and he advised he wasn't. The results of that polygraph indicated that he was being truthful and there was no deception.
Detectives were surprised that Gary passed the polygraph. Now, detectives have motive, they have access, but no evidence conclusively to show that Gary is in fact the killer.
With nothing to hold him on, Gary is free to go.
At this point, Gary is not ruled out as a suspect, but he takes a little bit more of a backseat.
Looking for new leads, investigators turn their focus back to the numerous employees who work at the building where Lori was killed.
What's difficult, particularly about a public space like this, is so many people have access. We talked to everybody that was a tenant in that building and started working our way through that process. Many of those folks were excluded based on fingerprints, evidence, everything else that could really put them to the side.
But police learned that the building's tenants weren't the only ones who had access that night.
We discovered that registration was being conducted from the University of Texas' satellite location at this office complex. And they stayed late after hours so that folks could come after work, sign up late into the evening. So this was definitely something of interest for us.
Detectives were able to get the names of the male students who had gone in that night, and they had them come down to the police department and they got fingerprints of these individuals.
Police processed the fingerprints of over a dozen students and receive an alarming result.
We were able to rule everyone out on the list with the exception of one. We had a fingerprint inside the men's restroom as well as a fire escape door. So this person is somebody we want to talk to and interview.
Detectives investigating the brutal murder of Lori Stout have just matched a set of crime scene fingerprints with someone who was in the building that night.
The University of Texas was having a sign-up registration at this satellite campus, which allowed people to come after hours in the evenings after work in order to get signed up for classes. So we start going through the list of registrants.
Detectives were able to determine that there was one student whose prints matched the prints inside the bathroom stall where Lori was found, and also on the fire escape door on that second floor.
That individual was identified as Robert Van Weese, and he was 18 years old.
Investigators interview Robert about his movements on the night Lori was killed.
He told us that he had been there for registration, and on his way out, he used the men's restroom upstairs. Once he was done in the restroom, he exited the fire escape because it was closer to where his vehicle was parked, and which would explain why his fingerprints were found in the men's stall and the fire escape door.
Robert Van Weese did acknowledge that he saw the cleaning lady, which was our victim, Lori, after using the bathroom on the second floor before he exited the building.
Robert tells detectives that he left the building at around 12:15 a.m. Before investigators look to verify his story, they ask Robert for a blood sample to compare to the semen found at the crime scene.
Robert Van Weese was cooperative. He gave the blood sample at the time, and the detectives submitted it for testing.
There is nothing that we discover on Robert Van Weese's criminal history or anything else that causes concern. It appears he's had no contact with law enforcement and no violent offenses in the past.
He came from a family that is very well respected. His parents are pretty well-known surgeons in the Austin area. There didn't seem to be anything that would suggest him to behave in this kind of violent way.
While they wait for the results, detectives look for anyone who can corroborate Robert's story.
Detectives interviewed 2 employees of the education office, and they confirmed that they saw Robert Van Weese leave the building at 12:15. We know Lori was still alive because there were witnesses that confirmed she was alive at 12:30.
With Robert looking less and less like a viable suspect, his blood test results come in.
The analysis of the blood sample told us that Robert was not a match to the bodily fluids found at the crime scene.
The discovery means there is no hard evidence against Robert, and they are forced to let him go.
Robert Van Wiese was ruled out and eliminated as a suspect.
With no new leads, the investigation falters. As weeks pass with no arrests, fear in the community grows.
The nature of the crime had created a lot of panic for residents, particularly females. It was difficult because there was no resolution.
It left a lot of fear in the community. The police felt pressure to find out who was responsible for Lori's death. I mean, this was a totally innocent mother, 22 years old, taken from her family in a very violent attack.
The people in and around that area where she was killed, they were interested in knowing what was going on. It was tough on our family. It is very frustrating. There's somebody out there that has taken a life, and you want that person to be held accountable.
Anytime there's a crime committed like this, there's an inherent pressure to solve it, to try to bring some closure and some comfort to the family and to the community.
A person that could do something like this, that's not somebody that's going to stop at that one act. Typically speaking, that person is going to continue to hurt other people.
We're always worried that, he can continue to commit these kind of acts until he's brought to justice.
1 month after Lori's murder, police receive a promising new lead.
We received information from a female victim of a man that committed a similar attack against her. The victim was sexually assaulted and strangled, but she was able to get away.
He mistakenly thought she was dead, and she was able to identify him. That person's name was Daryl Kemp. Daryl Kemp at that point was in prison, but he was not in prison at the time that Lori was killed.
And so we started looking into this. We evaluated the information and started to determine if this could potentially be a suspect in this case.
Police dig into Daryl Kemp's background and discover a disturbing pattern.
It's determined that Daryl Kemp committed an attack in 1960, similar, where the victim was sexually assaulted and strangled.
He was convicted for the rape and murder of a woman named Marjorie Hipperson in California. He did receive the death penalty for that. But later on, that death penalty got overturned.
Ultimately, he was released and paroled in 1978. That's when Daryl Kemp moved to Austin.
His MO matched. He's killed in this fashion before, and he was in Austin at the time. So this is going to be somebody that detectives look at pretty intently.
Could this be a serial rapist? Could it be a serial murder? We had questions that we needed to get answers to.
One month after young mother Lori Stout was found raped and murdered in a bathroom stall, police are investigating a tip that she was the victim of convicted serial killer Daryl Kemp.
Detectives at this time were thinking that Daryl Kemp was a strong possibility as a suspect because of the similar MO, which was sexual assault and strangulation.
Investigators learn that although Daryl is currently in jail for an unrelated crime, he was a free man at the time Lori was killed. Detectives head to prison to question him.
The difficult part about interviewing somebody like Daryl Kemp is he's obviously been down this road before. He's got knowledge of how investigations work, and so information may be withheld or may not be genuine in his responses based on where he thinks or feels like your questions are leading him.
Detectives start by questioning Daryl about where he was around the time of Lori's murder.
They're asking him questions that would help tie him or connect him to the area that the building was located in. They asked if he knew where this building was, where he lived, basically to try to put him in a geographical area, figure out where he frequented.
Daryl tells investigators he wasn't near the office building where Lori was killed and has no ties to the area.
Daryl Kemp was asked if he was familiar with Lori Stout. He said he wasn't. Things that we're trying to pay attention to is whether his statements are truthful. Does his body language support his statement? Does it appear he's being deceptive? And is he forthcoming with his answers?
Not trusting the word of a convicted killer, detectives shift gears.
He was asked if he would take a polygraph. He hesitated with that because he didn't trust polygraphs. He is not cooperative at all.
It's the same story when investigators ask him for his fingerprints and a blood sample.
Again, he was very uncooperative.
Based on all the evidence collected, we had enough information to obtain a warrant.
Police collect Daryl's samples and eagerly wait for the results.
When the results of the analysis were returned, it was determined that he was not the suspect in this murder. It's very difficult and frustrating because we're at a stalling point again.
With no other leads, the case once again hits a wall. As the months turn into years, Lori's loved ones struggle with the lack of closure.
Why are we not getting any answers? Give us something. I myself have been lost without her.
Every time October 1st rolls around, first thing I think is, it's Lori's birthday. Anytime when September comes around, when she was taken from us, it's not good.
The suspicion that Lori's husband Gary was the killer continues to linger and causes a deep divide.
My mother's family, even members of his own family, believed that my dad was involved.
We all still had that suspicion that Gary had something to do with it.
Eventually, Gary takes Dale and moves out of state.
Gary, he didn't want to have anything else to do with us. So it was like, oh my God, now we can't see Dale. I lost my sister, but I also lost that connection with my niece.
Being so young, she didn't really remember her mom. So it was probably quite hard on Dale.
When I was growing up, there weren't a whole lot of conversations about my mother. It was just the understanding of she wasn't there anymore.
As Dale grows older, she begins to ask questions.
My dad did not like talking about it. I did not have a family member sit me down and explain to me that this is what had happened to her. It wasn't until I got older, got access to the internet, that's when I learned that she was attacked, that she had been strangled, that she had been raped, and then she had been murdered. It was very overwhelming finding out about it in that way.
Lori's family continues to push for her killer to be brought to justice.
We never gave up hope. We tried to keep it fresh and focused on it. We were constantly checking in.
We had to get this case closed to help give our family a little peace. It was overwhelming.
The pressure finally pays off. And in 1992, nearly 10 years after Lori's murder, a new team of detectives reopen her case.
Now we have new eyes looking at everything. They look at the crime scene photos. They read all the police reports. They look at the various people that were interviewed.
Part of that process is to go back and look at old evidence. Are there things now that are available to law enforcement that weren't previously available? Is there testing that can be done?
Now we're in 1992, so we have DNA testing, which is much more powerful.
With that in mind, investigators revisit their prime suspect, Lori's husband, Gary Stout.
So Gary was contacted again and provided a DNA sample, which was compared to that obtained at the crime scene.
Police are hopeful that they'll finally have the evidence they need to make an arrest. But when the results come back, they are shocked at what they reveal.
It was determined that Gary was not a match. So officially, he could be ruled out as a suspect and remove the cloud of doubt that had been hanging over his head for some period of time.
I do believe that my father felt relief, but it was very difficult for him to talk about.
With Gary cleared, cold case detectives go back over the old files, line by line.
With any review of a case, you look at who's been interviewed, who's been eliminated. And what was discovered is that one of the reports that was provided as far as the blood typing seemed to have an error.
The documentation that was used to finalize the forensic report that excluded a suspect actually showed that there was a clerical error in that lab report. And that particular suspect should have been included as a suspect, not excluded. This is a big turning point in the investigation.
"10 years after wife and mother Lori Stout was savagely murdered, cold case detectives have unearthed a stunning error in the results of a blood test that means a previously cleared suspect might not be innocent after all.
What was discovered is that the report said the subject could be eliminated, but there was a clerical error in the document and it should have read that he could not be eliminated.
This suspect is Robert Van Wiese, the 18-year-old University of Texas student. He was in the building the night Lori was killed, registering for a class, and he's the same person whose prints were found inside the bathroom stall and also on the second floor fire escape door.
Detectives look into what Robert Van Wiese had been doing the last 10 years.
Robert Van Wiese had no criminal history. Here we have this 18-year-old college student coming from a well-to-do family, parents who are professionals, seemed to have a very normal, happy upbringing. He was cooperative. So that all combined with the report that we received, naturally excluded him as a suspect.
Could 18-year-old Robert really have committed such a brutal crime?
In talking with witnesses, Robert Van Wiese is seen about 12:15 a.m. and leaving at about 12:30. They see Lori in the building by herself.
Detectives re-examine the fingerprints he left at the crime scene and notice something troubling.
What they discover is that his story of exiting the building through that second floor fire escape door would naturally support fingerprints being left on the inside of that door, as if you're pushing it open to leave. But some prints of his are found on the door handle on the exterior of the door, as if you're opening it to enter the building.
What this told us is that he had obviously left the building, but he had also come back in.
He would have been able to re-enter it through that same door if he had propped it open with something.
The discoveries mean investigators need to talk to Robert, but there's a problem.
We try to locate Robert Van Wiese, but we're not able to. We reach out to family members who are not cooperative. They provide an attorney's contact. We talk to the attorney who states that Robert Van Wiese is probably somewhere in South America.
All evidence up to that point showed he was in the Austin area, and then he likely finds out that he once again is a suspect, and now we have DNA testing capability, so he flees.
Fearing Robert has left the country, detectives scramble to find him. They interview dozens of his friends and family members, but no one is willing to cooperate. Before they can launch an all-out search, detectives still need more proof that Robert's the killer. So they come up with a plan to obtain his DNA.
With Robert Van Wiese having fled, we cannot get a sample from him, but what we are able to do is get what's called YSTR testing accomplished. And that's familial DNA, and it's specific to the Y chromosome that all brothers and fathers would share. So since Robert Van Wiese has brothers in the Austin area, that's something we can actually test.
In order to obtain the sample, detectives conducted surveillance with family members, and at one point they observed one of the brothers discard trash and retrieve it.
Trash is not something you need to get a search warrant for because it's what's deemed abandoned. So detectives take specific items that would gather DNA evidence like razor blades and toothpicks, and they conduct YSTR testing.
When the DNA tests come back, the results are conclusive.
And lo and behold, it's a match.
Finally, we're able to make a direct connection with Robert Van Wiese to the DNA found at the crime scene. It was surprising to know that a young male coming from the background that he did had the ability to do this at such a young age.
There were no red flags with him. And so it was very unexpected to see him as the actual killer.
We finally had a name. I just totally broke down. And so you're trying to wrap your head around, how can an 18-year-old do something like this?
It was shocking because I was 18 myself at the time. I would have never have had that cross my mind. I said, okay, where is he at? Can we get him? And then that's when we learned that he was gone.
Robert Van Wiese is charged with murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, and a warrant is issued for his arrest. Investigators team up with the FBI and launch an international manhunt.
The Van Wiese family owned a lot of properties throughout Mexico. We conducted telephone toll analysis. We looked at financial records. We monitored travel of Van Wiese's family. We did a tremendous amount of ground surveillance on locations where we thought he might be. There were some tips that the FBI received for sightings of Van Wiese in Mexico in certain locations, but we weren't successful in locating him.
Years pass with no sign of Robert, but detectives refuse to quit.
All you want to do is bring the guy back so he can face justice and get some kind of closure for the victims. But even the FBI, we have limited access, limited resources, and Mexico is a big country. There's plenty of places for him to hide.
It is very frustrating because for me, I've lived my entire life waiting for justice, but also very cognizant of the fact that it may never happen.
Then in 2016, the hunt for Robert Van Wiese takes a promising turn.
Van Wiese had been on the run for 20 years, so I knew it was going to have to be something big for us to find him. And so we discussed it and we said, let's do it. Let's go for it.
On December 13th, 2016, the FBI places Robert Van Wiese on their top 10 most wanted list.
This was huge for our case because it brings awareness, but also that comes with a $100,000 reward. So it was exciting to know that we're making traction.
Once we announced his addition to the FBI's 10 most wanted list, we again interviewed people that knew him and possibly knew where he was. Probably the most important interview was with Van Wiese's mother. We said, Robert is going to be arrested. He is coming home. The safest way is to turn himself in. I think the mother realized with the $100,000 reward, his name on the 10 most wanted list, that it was going to be insurmountable that he was going to get arrested.
The pressure pays off, and a phone call comes in that changes everything.
Robert Van Wiese's attorney contacted the district attorney's office to let them know that he wants to turn himself in.
33 years after the murder of Lori Stout, her elusive killer, Robert Van Wiese, is ready to return to the U.S. to face justice.
Robert Van Wiese's lawyer contacted the district attorney's office and started to inquire about possible surrender with a plea bargain agreement. Typically speaking, when someone is a fugitive, we do not negotiate, but circumstances in this situation are quite unique. Mexico will not agree to extradite to Texas if the death penalty is on the table. So we will not get him in our hands if he's arrested in Mexico unless we agree to not have death penalty on the table.
Wanting a swift resolution, the district attorney negotiates a deal.
Van Wiese would agree to turn himself in, and they agreed to 30 years in prison.
On January 26, 2017, police head to the Mexican border to meet Robert.
The plan was for him to surrender, but we were holding our breath. We weren't sure it was going to happen.
We're anxious that this is finally going to take place, but until we have Robert Van Wiese in physical custody, we can't let our guard down.
The arrangement was that he would meet us at the halfway point on the pedestrian bridge. There's a line in the middle. On one side says Mexico, on the other side says United States. He was to meet us there at 1 o'clock. He didn't show up.
As the minutes tick by, investigators start to worry they've been duped.
We had assurances from the attorney that he would show up, but at any point during that time, he could have turned around and changed his mind, and there was nothing we could have done.
At 1:36 p.m., a lone figure approaches the border.
He walked up very slowly, stopped at the line. He introduced himself as Robert Van Wiese, and I said to him, "You ready to turn yourself in?" He took a deep breath. He closed his eyes. He said, yes. I said, step on across. And he took one step over and he was arrested.
Seeing him walk across that bridge and seeing law enforcement put handcuffs on him, it was extremely satisfying.
There'd been so much work from so many different people over the years that from 1983 up until 2017, now we have somebody that's accountable and be brought to justice. Was one of the most rewarding experiences in my career.
I sent the picture to Dale and let her know we got him. And I get a text back that it apparently was Dale's birthday. So it was pretty emotional.
She showed me a photo of Van Weese being escorted into custody. It's kind of hard to believe that after all of these years that it would be that day of all days that he would turn himself in.
It was, and it still is surreal that it finally did happen. I mean, it just emotions everywhere. I just can't, it's finally over. It's finally over. Finally over.
The plea deal means Robert does not have to speak to investigators, leaving them to piece together how they believe the murder unfolded.
He showed up that night to register for classes. He sees Lori as she's cleaning. It's possible that Robert Van Weese and Lori Stout had an interaction as he passed her. Maybe she spoke to him. He goes to the bathroom, develops his plan on coming back in.
He's opportunistic, and the opportunity rose, and he left through that fire escape door on the second floor, propped it open.
And once the other workers had all left, I think he came back in.
When he came back in, he would have passed in the parking lot the dumpster that had some leftover electrical wiring that Gary Stout had used that day for the hot water heater, and grabbed it and went upstairs and then attacked her, raped her, and killed her. Lori was killed in probably one of the most personal, violent ways that someone can be killed. Robert Van Weese is an extremely cold and calculating person.
On March 28, 2017, Robert pleads guilty to Lori's murder and is sentenced to 30 years in prison. Lori's sister, Beverly, is there to deliver an emotional impact statement.
I looked him right in the eye and told him what he had taken from our family and what it had done. And, I just told him I hope he rots in hell and gets to feel some of that terror that my sister felt that night. I know in my heart he is where he needs to be.
I think Lori's family felt a sense of relief, a sense of closure that maybe now, at least my hope for them now with that is that they could at least start to heal.
Him being arrested and incarcerated does bring closure. I think that that's what everybody dreams about when a crime like this happens to one of their family members.
Still see Lori's face quite often. She was a hoot. Lori was a hoot. I miss her dearly.
I do believe that my life would have been very different if she would have lived. And I know that she would have done anything to make sure that I had what I needed.
I still think of Lori every day, every single day. There were a lot of good times, good memories with Lori, and I just wish we would have had more.
A brilliant, free-spirited college student.
Barbara was very creative. She was always very theatrical.
I always thought she was a genius because everything came so easy to her.
Is found brutally murdered in a mountain canyon.
We could see 5 or 6 gunshot wounds.
There was some speculations that she had been sexually assaulted.
A clue left by the victim leads to surprising suspects.
He finds this note addressed to all the Mormon roommates that she was leaving to go be with her people.
Just how bad was this relationship with her roommates, and what could it cause anyone to do?
And a series of bizarre twists.
He's telling us that bullet holes were in a triangular pattern, and that's a sign of a possible Satan killing.
Somebody took her up there into the woods. This was potentially a sacrifice.
Until the evidence reveals a killer no one saw coming.
There was DNA from the soil that was underneath her body.
It was like finding a needle in a haystack, a big haystack.
It just didn't seem like somebody who would kill somebody.
It was just the biggest shock you could fathom.
Provo, Utah, a small college town in a picture-perfect mountain setting.
Provo sits in a county south of Salt Lake. It's where the Brigham Young University campus is at.
It's a very safe community. During the 1970s, Provo was definitely a place that was very low on crime, and you didn't have to worry about locking your doors at night.
That innocence is lost on a cold March afternoon in 1974, when a grisly discovery in a nearby canyon sends shockwaves through the community.
On March 11th, 1974, the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office received a telephone call from a power company worker who started walking up from the power plant. And as he was cutting through some brush, he came across a white female with gunshot wounds to her back.
The crime scene is essentially a couple miles up what we call Big Cottonwood Canyon.
Investigators race to the canyon where the utility worker leads them to the body.
We could see 5 or 6 gunshot wounds. All of them looked to be in her back or in her arm. The shot placements looked like execution type shots, and it looked like she had been there for a few hours at least. With the way that her body was positioned, we felt like sexual assault was part of this crime scene. Her arms were tucked up underneath her. That told us that she was in pain, that she was fearful of what was happening to her. We're looking for things like drag marks, but the ground around the body was not disturbed.
It looks like where she was is where she was killed.
Detectives are struck by an unusual detail.
Her clothes were folded neatly and piled towards the top of her head.
We suspected that the victim was probably trying to buy some time. As she was being told to undress, she was stacking her clothes in this neat pile.
More evidence is revealed when they turn the victim over.
We found some possibly .38 caliber bullets that were recovered after they had gone through the victim's body. We also picked up some soil and logged it into our evidence room.
The detectives back in the 70s, they didn't have the DNA that we have in today's crime scene investigations. They focused on all kinds of trace evidence like the soil, fibers, hairs may link the suspect to that scene.
While the body is taken to the morgue, detectives interview their only witness.
The only thing we really knew at this point was a utility worker had found this body, and we were able to clear him fairly quickly, but we didn't know who the victim was. We didn't have any other real suspects to go with at that point. We got a hold of the local media, let them know that we had a white female, Jane Doe, that we were trying to identify. Later that night, we received a telephone call from the Brigham Young University Police Department that they had received a missing person report of a white female earlier that day. The missing person in Provo matched the description of our Jane Doe.
The missing person is 22-year-old student Barbara Jean Rocky, but police need a formal identification to be sure she's also their murder victim.
We made a phone call down to a couple of the guys that were hanging out with Barbara.
Jerry Hicker is the one that filed the missing persons report. Jerry is also a student at BYU, and he was a friend of Barbara's and some of her roommates.
Edward Fisher and Jerry Hicker went to the morgue to do an identification on our Jane Doe.
Edward and Jerry confirm the murdered woman is Barbara Rocky. Police now face the difficult task of informing her family.
At the time of Barbara's murder, my parents were living in California.
My mom found out first from the police and was crying, and from then on, nothing was the same.
It was just the biggest shock you could fathom. It's like what you knew of the world has just imploded.
Born in 1952, Barbara had an idyllic childhood growing up in Menlo Park, California.
Barbara was very creative. She was always very theatrical.
I always thought she was a genius because languages and music came so easy to her. Barbara was always rooting for the underdog. If somebody needed help, she would open doors for them. I mean, always doing something very sweet.
When the time came to go to college, Barbara's choice reflected a growing spiritual interest.
Barbara was always searching for a religion.
Barbara was interested in the Mormon religion. My parents were very happy for her to go to Brigham Young because they felt that she would get the safe group of friends and the good education and religion that she required.
When Barbara went off to college, she seemed up and happy and like things were going well.
Investigators asked Barbara's loved ones if they can think of anyone who might be responsible.
Since she was away at college and out of our supervision, we had no idea what she was doing. We just didn't know what kind of friends she was making.
In speaking with the family, they just had no idea on who could have done this to her.
With the family unable to provide leads, detectives hope her college friends might be able to point them in the right direction.
Ed Fisher was dating one of Barbara's roommates. When asked if he had any idea who would have done this to Barbara, he just had no idea. He felt Jerry Hicker might have more information about Barbara than he would.
Jerry Hicker is also a student at BYU, and Barbara seemed to spend lots of time with him.
Jerry described that he was just devastated that this had happened to Barbara. He knew Barbara very well.
Police asked Jerry what led him to file a missing persons report just hours before Barbara was found dead.
He said that he had gone skiing the day before, used Barbara's car to take the skis back, and then he met up with Barbara on March 11th at about 10 o'clock in the morning and gave the car keys back with plans to meet up later on to go grocery shopping. After leaving Barbara, Jerry spoke with one of Barbara's roommates, and then he went to study at the library. Later that day, Jerry and Barbara had plans to grab some food, but she didn't show up. As Jerry left the BYU campus, he walked past Barbara's house and he didn't see Barbara's car, so he continued towards his home. And as he was passing the Park Plaza apartments and sees Barbara's car sitting in the parking lot, which was someplace that Barbara would have never parked her car.
He said that was kind of odd, why it would have been parked where it's not normally parked.
Inside the car, he finds this note that was left by Barbara. It's addressed to all the roommates that basically said that she had found her people, that she was leaving to go be with her people. I think that he looked at it as a suicide note, and so he took the note over to the roommates, and that raised enough suspicion to report her as a missing person.
In order to clear Jerry as a person of interest, detectives drilled deeper into his timeline.
Jerry gave his timeline up until that evening, and essentially once he found that letter, he came and talked to us.
Jerry reported her missing, he found the note, he was cooperating with detectives, so he really wasn't somebody that fit as a suspect.
When detectives asked Jerry about any conflicts Barbara may have had, he mentions one unexpected source.
Jerry tells investigators that the roommates and Barbara kind of have an off-again, on-again relationship.
Barbara Jean Rockey lived with 7 other women from Mormon families. Barbara sometimes liked to do things for shock value, and this is not a place people go to shock others.
There was a little bit of intimidation between Barbara and some of the girls. Jerry said that things had gotten so bad that he had tried to find Barbara another place to live.
Was it possible one of Barbara's roommates could be the culprit behind her death?
Just how bad was this relationship that Barbara Jean Rockey had with her roommates, and what could it cause anyone to do?
Coming up, detectives uncovered dark secrets.
The majority of the roommates were very religious.
He had a relationship with Barbara Jean and had been dating one of her roommates.
A love triangle could easily turn deadly when there's jealousy involved.
He had pulled a dagger on her and said he was going to stab her.
And links to a terrifying killer.
She described him as a great warlock and maybe even a devil worshiper.
There's women all over the American West that are going missing and being discovered dead.
This guy turns out to be probably the most famous, notorious serial killer of all time.
Until the evidence reveals the horrific truth.
He was not who we suspected, and so to learn that he was responsible for killing her was very surprising.
After 22-year-old college student Barbara Rockey is found shot dead, police have discovered she had clashed with her roommates and bring them in separately for questioning.
The roommates had only known her since January when Barbara moved into the house, and going to the predominantly Mormon school, Barbara really didn't fit that mold. She was from California and she was more of a free spirit.
She was somebody who was very opinionated and was not a conformist.
Barbara Jean Rockey's roommates say that she was kind of dating around, not necessarily saving herself from marriage, and it was generally not accepted.
The roommates were very religious. They attended church faithfully. I think Barbara would probably experiment with different religions just to expand her knowledge, and at times would do things that would maybe scare them.
Barbara Jean's roommate said she was kind of into witchcraft, so she was attracted to that lifestyle a little bit.
They didn't want to be a part of Barbara's life, so they would keep her at arm's length.
Had one of Barbara's roommates lashed out and done something unthinkable?
Being more of the typical LDS BYU student, you just wouldn't think that somebody like that could kill somebody. But until you do the leather work on it, you can't clear them.
Detectives work to verify the roommates' alibis.
Once the investigators corroborated all the stories and looked at the timelines, they were able to clear the roommates as not being somebody that had killed Barbara.
As detectives continue asking the roommates about Barbara, they learn some startling new information.
Investigators found out through the interviews of the roommates that Barbara would carry a .357 revolver pistol. Some of the roommates described Barbara as being maybe a little bit paranoid, where she would think people were following her.
In 1974, people weren't just walking around with guns the way they do today. So if a 21-year-old college kid was walking around with a .357 Magnum pistol, who was she afraid of?
Detectives get more surprises when they search Barbara's vehicle.
When the investigators looked in the rear of the vehicle and they found ammunition and targets, things that you wouldn't expect in a female BYU student's car. Did Barbara feel like she needed to have a gun? Did she practice with the gun? Was somebody after her? We weren't sure what all of that meant at that point. The car was fingerprinted, but there was just nothing of good forensic value that we could come up with at that time.
With more questions than answers, detectives turn their attention back to the note Barbara's friend Jerry had found earlier in Barbara's car.
They found a victim shot multiple times, and then someone else finds this note in her car that says she's leaving to be with her people. And what's the purpose of this?
The investigators were wondering if the note was even authored by Barbara, so they do some handwriting analysis on it and send it out to have that done.
While detectives await results, the autopsy report comes in.
At that time, they came up with 6 bullet hole entrance wounds. The shot in the arm was probably the bullet that killed her, because it went back into the chest and hit some vital organs. And the final wounds were when Barbara was turned over and on her stomach, and the entrance wounds were in her back.
Being shot in the back is a good indicator that the person is known by the assailant. He doesn't want to see their face when he kills them.
At the autopsy, the medical examiner took swabs of both her rectum and her vaginal area to try to preserve any evidence that might be there.
The autopsy report indicated no definitive evidence that she had been sexually assaulted.
With the autopsy offering no new leads, investigators turn their focus to any romantic relationships Barbara may have had.
They were talking with the roommates more about other men that may be in Barbara's life, and they came up with a guy named Richard. They knew that Barbara was very much infatuated with him. She spoke about him all the time, even called him her boyfriend.
As police focus on Richard, they make a disturbing discovery.
They had asked if Richard had ever been violent towards Barbara, and Barbara had relayed one story that Richard had pulled a dagger on her and that he was going to stab her.
This was not the only alarming story Barbara's roommates relayed to detectives.
About a month before Barbara was murdered, she reported that her gun was missing, and that raises all kinds of concerns. She reported it to campus police, and to my knowledge, she never got that gun back. A .357 revolver would have fit with the potential murder weapon that killed Barbara. She had expressed concern to her roommates that the person that had taken the gun may use that gun on her, and the roommates just kind of dismissed it. But now that Barbara was found shot to death, the roommates were concerned for themselves as well. Having that information, the investigators really wanted to find out who Richard was. At this point, all we have is Richard's first name. He's willing to maybe take a dagger and stab her.
We strongly felt that he could have been responsible for her murder.
Three days have passed since student Barbara Rockey was discovered shot dead in Big Cottonwood Canyon, and police are hunting a man named Richard, who they believe is her boyfriend.
This could be the person that killed Barbara, but all we have is Richard's first name, and so we're kind of running into a dead end.
With no way to identify their potential prime suspect, detectives catch a lucky break.
Out of the blue, a guy named Richard Finder calls into our department and tells us that he knew Barbara Rockey.
Richard Finder initiated contact, offering his services to basically try to help them solve this case.
First question we had was, is this the Richard that we've been looking for?
As investigators prepare to meet with Richard Finder, they learn everything they can about him.
We find out that he's in his 30s, and he's a self-proclaimed psychic. He lived in California. Barbara was from California, so that was one of the connections that they had. We also found out that a .357 pistol was registered to him, which is obviously the same caliber that we're looking for.
Richard Finder arrives at the sheriff's office, and detectives begin by asking him about his relationship with the 22-year-old college student.
Barbara heard Richard Finder on the radio talking about the occult. Barbara had called into the radio station. They ended up exchanging phone numbers. Barbara had gone up to see him at his hotel, and I think Barbara at one point even felt that Richard was her boyfriend. Richard claimed that it was just a spiritual relationship, that he looked at Barbara not in a physical way.
Under further questioning, Richard mentions something that gets the detectives' attention.
The place that he was staying at was very close to the mouth of the canyon where it was that Barbara Jean was found.
Detectives cut to the chase and ask Richard where he was on March 11th, the day that Barbara was killed.
He tells them that he was in Salt Lake at the time of the murder. He said that he had gotten up and had some breakfast, and then he went over and helped a friend do some construction work on a house all day long, and then he went back home and went to sleep on the couch.
Detectives set to work checking out Richard's alibi.
The guy that Richard Finder was staying with did confirm that Richard was with him in the evening, but he could not confirm the times that Richard told us about during the daytime.
With holes in Richard's alibi, detectives dig deeper into his claims about his relationship with Barbara.
Our investigators talked to Barbara's therapist, and she just really got the impression that Barbara was in love with Richard.
The therapist reveals another way the relationship was less innocent than Richard made it seem.
Barbara described Richard as a great warlock and maybe even a devil worshiper.
I think that the satanic and the witchcraft, it's not too far-fetched to think, okay, somebody took her up there into the woods. This was potentially a sacrifice.
When police confront Richard with these allegations, his response is even more alarming.
He's telling us that he's having these dreams and that she was shot in the back in a triangular pattern, and that's a sign of a possible Satan killing or devil worship. Richard also told us that he had a vision that the murder weapon was also thrown into water. How would he know that we didn't have the murder weapon? So that really raised a question to us. We're wondering, is this guy confessing to us? Is he telling us about our crime scene? He has all of this knowledge. Is this guy the one that killed Barbara that day?
When you start putting all of these things together, it made Richard Finder a pretty good suspect.
Despite the circumstantial evidence stacking up against him, detectives need something more concrete.
So we collect all of his weapons for ballistic tests with the projectiles that we located from Barbara's body. We received the results from the ballistics test, and they were not a match. And that pretty much blew up most of our case with Richard Finder.
Detectives pin their hopes on the results of the handwriting analysis on the note found in Barbara's vehicle.
Maybe she wrote the note under duress. Maybe she was forced to write the note.
That could be a significant clue, especially if it's determined that our victim didn't author the note. It's like someone's writing a suicide note for someone else.
The handwriting analysis came back and it showed that Barbara was the one that had written the note.
The letter itself seemed to be a valid letter to her friends, and several people said that's Barbara's handwriting.
The investigators concluded that maybe Barbara was thinking about moving home and she was just explaining that in the note. At this point, we're starting to run out of leads.
As the investigation stalls, Barbara's family is rocked by another tragedy.
My dad would call the police practically every day when nothing was coming to fruition. And he died like within a year after she died.
It killed my father. And we had so many key relatives die, still wanting to know what happened to Barbara.
Detectives never give up on the case, and a year later, in 1975, they notice a disturbing pattern of crimes.
There's women all over the American West that are going missing and being discovered dead.
College co-eds with dark hair were found murdered, and the serial killer was certainly the big topic of conversation.
A surprising arrest changes the whole course of the investigation.
In 1975, a Utah State trooper makes an arrest west of Salt Lake City.
The suspect was arrested for a kidnapping case, and some of the evidence in the vehicle definitely could have had something to do with Barbara's murder as well.
The driver's name is Ted Bundy.
This guy turns out to be probably the most famous, notorious serial killer of all time. Is he the one that killed Barbara?
A year and a half after the murder of Barbara Rockey, the investigation is sparked back into life by the arrest of notorious serial killer Ted Bundy.
More and more that police start investigating Ted Bundy, the more connections they find to missing and murdered women all over the country.
In 1974, Ted Bundy was also in the Utah area, going to school at the University of Utah.
Barbara Jean fit Ted Bundy's profile.
She was a college student. She was a brunette, and she was the age that Ted Bundy seemed to target.
Ted Bundy had a reputation of being a very charming man. You know, he was a good-looking guy and was kind of a smooth talker.
Ted Bundy would act like he was hurt and ask for some assistance from a female, and that would have fit right with the personality of Barbara. She would have helped Ted Bundy if he had approached her.
With Barbara fitting the profile of Bundy's victims, detectives connect with the FBI.
The investigators were able to get a hold of a timeline that the FBI had prepared find out what his whereabouts were on March 11, 1974. When the investigators looked at Ted Bundy's timeline, they found that he had an ironclad alibi for that day because he was in Washington committing another murder.
With Bundy cleared, the Barbara Rockey investigation grinds to a halt.
The investigators had done everything forensically that they could. They had done all the interviews that they could. They had looked at all the suspects that they could, and the case just went cold.
Once the case was cold, we pretty much accepted that it was not going to be solved.
When a case goes cold, it definitely affects the family every bit as much, if not more, than the investigator. They just want someone to be held accountable for their daughter's death.
The case lies unsolved for 30 years, while Barbara's family yearns for answers.
The hope and the drive to crack this case someday was powered by losing so many family members that were enraged and wanted justice. So we had nothing to lose by trying.
In 2005, Barbara's loved ones make one last push for justice.
I asked Mom, I said, do you want me to try to open this? And she said yes, because I need to know before I die.
I was a fairly new homicide detective, and my phone rang, and it was one of the family members saying, hey, my sister was killed back in 1974. Our mom's getting up in years, and she'd really like to know who killed her daughter.
The family would expect us to just do what needs to be done to solve their case, and you can't put a price tag on this level of justice.
Digging into the 30-year-old case files, detectives' attention is drawn to one suspect in particular, the self-proclaimed psychic, Richard Finder.
I was not convinced that law enforcement had closed the door all the way on Richard Finder.
I wanted to look into Richard further because the timeline to me wasn't rock solid, and I wanted to try to look more into the forensic end of it. DNA and the ballistic stuff has come a long ways since 1974. As I'm looking through each piece of evidence, I'm trying to figure out if that would have any forensic benefit to having tested.
While evidence from the original crime scene is sent to the crime lab, investigators dig deeper into Richard's version of events.
As I started looking at Richard's alibi, I spoke with some of the same people that the investigators had spoke with previously.
As we reinvestigated and re-interviewed these people, information that wasn't known back then was revealed.
What I learned was that Richard had been dating and seeing a friend of Barbara's, Janelle. But then Barbara also found that Janelle was getting closer to Richard Finder than Barbara was, and there was some animosity from what I understand regarding that.
I learned that sometime very close to the murder, Richard had left town with Janelle Bach, and Richard and Janelle became boyfriend and girlfriend, and that was kind of a blow to Barbara. That really kind of stuck out to me.
Janelle came back to Salt Lake for 3 or 4 days around the time of the homicide with Richard Finder, and they were staying at a house just west of the mouth of the canyon where Barbara was found.
Had Barbara confronted Richard about Janelle only for the encounter to turn fatal?
Because of this relationship between Janelle and Barbara, and because Richard Finder supposedly had guns, and then because of his witchcraft and the possibility of human sacrifice, Richard Finder was up there on the list as a potential suspect.
Investigators try to bring Richard in for another interview.
Unfortunately, we found that Richard Finder had passed away.
So really the only avenue I had was to go talk with Janelle.
Was Janelle the only living person who knew what really happened to Barbara?
I didn't see any information in the case file where Janelle Bach had really given a good interview about Richard Finder, and so that was the place that I wanted to start.
Barbara was upset that Janelle had essentially taken Richard Finder, so when they came back, there's this potential triangle and some jealousy, it placed some suspicion on Janelle.
Anytime an investigation reveals some sort of a love triangle that can easily turn deadly when there's jealousy involved, and all of a sudden the whole thing shifts from one guy to the person that's least suspected.
3 decades after Barbara Rockey was found murdered in a Utah canyon, cold case detectives want to speak to Barbara's former roommate, Janelle, who had been dating Richard Finder, the psychic Barbara had fallen in love with.
Janelle was looked at because of this triangle and this dispute, and Richard Finder was aware that there was this jealousy.
Detectives want to know if either Richard or Janelle had the opportunity to kill Barbara.
They were back in Salt Lake for 3 or 4 days on a ski trip during the time of Barbara's demise, but they never went skiing. And they were staying at a place that was close to the crime scene where Barbara was found.
Janelle was able to give me a timeline that she was with Richard that day, and the hours that she wasn't coincided with the times from the initial investigation.
It was confirmed with others that she was very sick when she came up here. She didn't even leave the house, and she was being taken care of by Richard Finder during the time of the homicide and was not in that area.
Janelle Bach was able to give me enough information to make me feel that he definitely was not the killer of Barbara, and she was not a suspect any longer.
Undeterred, detectives scour through the files from 1974, looking for details the original investigators may have missed.
As I was going through the case file, Jerry Hicker's name kept popping up.
So Jerry's early role in the case was he was one of the last people to allegedly have seen Barbara Jean at about 10 o'clock in the morning.
He reported her missing, so he really wasn't somebody that they were looking at as having a role in her death.
They were really good friends. That came through in the investigation, but I wasn't satisfied about him not being a suspect.
Detectives reach out to Barbara's former roommates, asking them about Jerry.
Some of the roommates told me that, Jerry just didn't have a lot of friends, and Barbara was accepting of everybody. And Jerry just kind of latched on to Barbara, and I think Jerry had more romantic feelings for Barbara than Barbara did for him.
I think that the roommates kind of looked at Jerry as basically kind of a stray pet that people were taking care of.
He just didn't seem like somebody who would kill somebody.
When investigators dig into Jerry's life after Barbara's murder, they make a disturbing discovery.
Jerry had been accused of rape in the Provo area after Barbara's murder.
When I found that Jerry was arrested for a sexual assault, I want to know, could Jerry have been the one that killed Barbara? Barbara's roommate had been away from Jerry for a long time. In the interviews, I found out that Jerry really had an obsession with guns, and that he helped Barbara find the .357 that she bought. He took her out, showed her how to shoot the .357.
Jerry would always tell Barbara about how to load her firearm, leaving one of the cylinders in the revolver empty, and then looking back and seeing that Barbara was shot 5 times. Is that relevant in this case?
We actually looked at the ME's report, and we couldn't really determine if she had been shot 5 or 6 times. There was the opinion that it was 6, but it could have also been through the re-entries and fragments, could have been 5.
As I'm going through these interviews and I'm listening to what the roommates are telling me, he was a rock-solid suspect at this point.
Detectives race to track down Jerry Hicker.
I went to Jerry Hicker's house in Washington. I explained to him that I was looking at the Barbara Rockey case. Jerry immediately said, you'll have to talk with my attorney, and that he wasn't going to give me a statement. So at that point, I had nothing else to do but leave.
With Jerry refusing to cooperate, investigators must find concrete evidence to link him to Barbara's murder.
We wanted to see if with today's technology, that if there was a sexual assault, that there might be something suitable for DNA testing.
I was pretty excited to find that a vaginal and rectal swab had been taken on Barbara, because By now, we were utilizing DNA testing, and I thought that I was going to be able to match those up with DNA that we got from whatever suspects were in the case file.
Investigators hope that the swab test results will point toward Jerry.
They didn't know about DNA in 1974, and they packaged everything in plastic. Because it was packaged in plastic, it ruined any DNA that was in any of the biological material that was taken. I was devastated. I thought I was going to be able to solve that case really quickly, but that's not what happened.
Fearing that the case will go cold again without solid evidence, investigators gamble on another way to obtain the evidence they're looking for.
I took items that had not been tested yet from the original evidence to our crime lab to have them tested.
The original crime scene evidence includes a soil sample from beneath Barbara's body.
I was just more or less taking the dirt out to have a sample taken in case some seminal fluid had migrated down into the dirt.
There was still the belief, based on the scene and everything, that there was a possibility of a sexual assault.
When I got the results of the test, surprisingly, we got a match that there was DNA from the soil that was underneath Barbara's body.
After 30 years, had DNA analysis finally identified Barbara's killer?
And what came back as a result of that testing was shocking.
It's been 33 years since student Barbara Rockey was found stripped and shot in Big Cottonwood Canyon, Utah. In 2007, DNA in a soil sample from under her body finally reveals her killer.
Finding that DNA in the soil was like finding a needle in a haystack, a big haystack.
The results come in, and we've got a match, and it's Jerry Hicker.
Just that little bit of information was all that we needed to link Jerry Hicker to this crime scene. He was not who we suspected initially. And so to learn that he was the one responsible for killing her was very surprising.
On November 6th, 2007, 56-year-old Jerry Hicker is charged with the first-degree murder of Barbara Rockey.
When I first found out that the killer of Barbara was Jerry Hicker, I was surprised because I heard that he was just sort of a guy from next door.
It was a shock. I never thought it would be solved.
As prosecutors prepare for their day in court, they piece together a theory of how Jerry killed Barbara.
So our belief of what happened was Jerry Hicker knew that Barbara may be leaving, because that next morning, and he was aware of the letter before he brought the car back.
I think what tipped him over the edge was he wanted Barbara sexually, and her rejection and her indication of leaving Jerry was more than he could take.
Hicker winds up talking Rockey into going up Big Cottonwood Canyon with this scenic view one more time before she leaves.
And when they get to this spot, Jerry's trying to put the moves on Barbara, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with Jerry that way.
Hicker takes out a gun, and in rage, he tells her to strip down, and she was probably folding the clothes in order to buy herself a little more time.
Barbara's pleading for her life. She's just trying to get anything into Jerry's mind to not do this.
And then he shot her, apparently while she was standing up. And then she went down, and then he shot her 4 times in the lower back region.
After the murder, Jerry tried to cover his tracks.
Jerry has to drive back to campus. He gets rid of the gun, and he's trying to come up with alibis. He knows he can't park the car right there at Barbara's house, so he takes it over to the Parkway Plaza apartments, and that's where he decides he's going to use this letter making her a missing person.
This was a young woman who trusted somebody. They're supposed to be going to a nice spot, and instead she's shot and murdered.
I felt so horrible knowing that she had gone through something like that. She was probably so scared Nobody deserved to die like that. Nobody.
I believe that Jerry was being the concerned, loving friend, and that may have put some thoughts in the investigator's mind that there's just no way Jerry could have done this.
Beneath his facade just seemed to be rage and anger that he'd been rejected.
I think Jerry Hicker was a sexual predator. They got away with a lot of crimes.
We were so glad and so grateful that the detectives had worked so hard. It boggled my mind that they could solve it after 34 years.
Despite an airtight case against Jerry, his declining health leaves prosecutors with a new dilemma.
When I went to arrest Jerry, he had been diagnosed with cancer. He was just the shell of a man. We didn't feel that his lifespan was much of 5 years, if that.
So we worked out a deal that he would plead to a substantially reduced charge of manslaughter, and that he would be sentenced to the prison for 5 years, figuring that that would be a life sentence.
Going with the plea deal was my mom's decision. She wanted him to say in his own words that he did it. She wanted those answers.
Jerry Hicker serves 3 years in Utah State Prison, and in 2014, 5 years after pleading guilty, he dies of cancer.
I bet you he had been looking over his shoulders all these years. I felt that his ill health was Barbara's justice.
This is somebody that wasted away not only his life, he ruined so many people's lives by his selfish act. Barbara didn't deserve this. She had so much ahead of her, but the family does have some answers. That's the goal in my investigation.
I think that in this case, justice was served and that the family got answers that they would not have otherwise had.
The thing I miss most about Barbara was the times that we used to blast Beatles music and sing and dance for hours and just being kids, you know. I remember her then.
Barbara was such a giving person. I feel inspired by her ability to give of herself. And I try to emulate that.
A woman enjoying retirement after a lifetime of hard work.
My mother did very well for herself. She was a very strong-willed woman.
Nina was quirky. I can't tell you how much she loved frogs and Elvis Presley and country music. She just marched to her own drum and did her thing.
Found brutally murdered in her home.
He stabbed her 24 times. There was blood throughout the house. It's like living in a bad horror movie.
A dangerous predator eludes police.
She had been sexually assaulted. Our victim potentially knew who the suspect was.
I kept asking them, is this going to be a cold case? And they kept telling me, we're not done yet.
DNA evidence leads to a shocking realization.
It was a match to another murder.
The thought that we had a serial killer here in town scared the hell out of me.
And a suspect no one saw coming.
To call this an unexpected killer is an understatement.
That's like every person's nightmare.
It hit me like a ton of bricks.
Kansas City is a large metropolitan area on the border between Kansas and Missouri.
Kansas City can be a very fun place to be. We love our sports in this city. It's a very friendly place to live.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary on October 29th, 2010, until Kansas City police receive a 911 call about a woman found unresponsive in her home.
A woman called police and said she discovered her mother at the bottom of the basement stairs, and she checked her for vital signs and found she was dead.
When the first officer arrives on the scene, the caller leads them to her 75-year-old mother, Nina Whitney.
I showed them my mother's body laying at the
bottom of the stairs. I told the police officers I believe she had just dropped over from a heart attack. And then I called my cousin Kim.
The phone rang and I picked it up, and Paige told me my mother is dead. Paige said she thought maybe Aunt Nina fell down the stairs going to the garage.
While Paige speaks with her cousin on the phone, police take a closer look at Nina's body.
Nina was face down, and there was a shelving unit there with a bunch of glass frogs, and a lot of those frogs had fallen off the shelf on top of her. It initially looks like an accident and a natural death, but when they rolled the victim over, they discovered several stab wounds in her chest. And also what were determined were defensive wounds on her hands, which is something that we see when someone fights back.
Clearly, this is no accident, and detectives arrive to begin a homicide investigation.
When someone's stabbed like the victim was, it usually means there's some sort of emotion tied there, because you're actually stabbing someone instead of just shooting them or something like that. Her blouse had been pulled up, and there were buttons missing, and they quickly discovered that they're what they believed to be saliva on her breast, which they swabbed. So it felt like this was sort of a sexual in nature homicide.
Police inform Paige that her mother has been murdered.
I don't think I've ever been that stunned in my entire life. It's so surreal. It's like living in a bad horror movie. I don't know how to describe it. You're just totally and completely stunned.
A lifelong native of the Midwest, Nina Whitney was a woman with humble roots.
My mother was born in South Dakota, and then their family wound up here in Kansas City in the late 40s, early 50s. My mother had a very rough life. My mom's mom left their family, so my mom was left to take care of her younger siblings. She married my father, and my parents divorced when I was about 9 years old. My father left her pretty much destitute, so it was just the two of us. And we struggled tremendously. My mother worked some very hard jobs, and we lived on food stamps.
Eventually, Nina found a stable, well-paying career.
She worked on the assembly line at General Motors here in Kansas City. She managed to buy a house, and she did very well for herself. She was a very strong-willed woman.
Nina wanted a better life for her daughter and encouraged Paige to get an education.
I went into criminal justice at Central Missouri State University, and I was a probation parole officer for 25 years. The older I became, the closer my mother and I became. We spent a tremendous amount of time together. My mother started collecting frogs back in the mid-70s. Ceramic, glass, dishes, clothes, bedding, towels. The entire house was filled, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, with frogs.
Nina's favorite hobby earned her the nickname the Frog Lady.
Nina was quirky. I can't tell you how much she loved frogs and Elvis Presley and country music. She just marched to her own drum and did her thing.
Investigators are stunned that someone would viciously attack this 75-year-old woman in her home.
I was in total shock, truly. She was in her house, minding her own business, not doing anything wrong. Like, how on earth did that happen?
When I found out Nina had been killed, I couldn't imagine who could have done this. I had no ideas.
Detectives interview Paige to narrow down when the murder might have taken place.
Friday, about 6:45, I decided to call my mother to see what time she wanted to go shopping on Saturday. And that's when she didn't answer the phone. It was extremely unusual for her not to answer the phone. So then I called the cell phone, and she didn't answer that either. Then I started to panic. So then I took off and went out south toward her house. And when I got to her house, the porch light was not on, and I knew something was very wrong. So I walked through to the kitchen, and it was dark. So I turned the light on, and there was her body laying at the bottom of the stairs. And I could feel the back of her head, and her head was ice cold. And I called 911, and then it just kind of hit me out of the blue that I was hearing weird noises. So I followed the noise upstairs to the hall bathroom. both faucets in the tub were running full blast. And I thought, well, that's just really strange because my mother didn't use that bathroom.
Detectives wonder if Nina's killer had turned on the faucets, and if so, why?
The victim's daughter had located the guest bathroom bathtub faucets running, and she had turned those faucets off. So the bathroom was processed for fingerprints and DNA.
In the victim's bedroom, there was like an imprint of where it looked like somebody had been laying on the comforter.
And near the bed, we could see buttons that appeared to be similar to the victim's blouse, as well as a hair roller that was similar to the hair rollers in the victim's hair. So that led us to believe that the victim was assaulted and maybe her blouse may have been torn open at that location.
As every corner of the house is searched for evidence, investigators make a crucial discovery.
We opened up the knife drawer in the kitchen and located a paring knife where the blade was bent and there was blood at the base of the blade near the handle. That could mean that somebody had tried to wipe it clean.
Forensics bagged the knife for further analysis and processed the house with luminol, which can indicate the presence of blood.
The luminol tells us that somebody was moving around in that house with some amount of blood on them. We got that blue glow in the victim's bedroom, bathroom, hallway, living room, and the kitchen.
The front door was unlocked, and we didn't find any sign of forced entry, which was a big clue for us that our victim potentially knew who the suspect was.
There's no reason for anyone to hurt her. And my mother was not a very social person at all. She had no family other than me here in town that would be in and out of the house.
Page points to one detail detectives could not have determined from their search.
There was a shelf by the front door where her cell phone always was, so she could take it when she went out the front door, and it was missing.
Had the killer snatched Nina's cell phone? Police request a trace on it, while officers go door to door looking for witnesses.
One of my other detectives found a party down the street that had seen a white male in the neighborhood earlier that day. He was in his 50s, walking with a limp. The witness saw him go to a black Jeep. He saw that car was parked kind of behind the house, about a block away. And so he sees this guy walking and kind of looking around. And so he just kind of mentally noted it. He kind of looked like he was probably up to no good.
Could the suspicious man be Nina Whitney's killer? As they start to track him down, detectives catch a break.
We found that Nina's phone was still on and still being used in South Kansas City. We were able to do surveillance and observe the person using our victim's cell phone.
Coming up, a break in the case reveals a potential serial killer.
We had another homicide.
There were zip ties that have been used for bindings.
He's terrorized an entire community.
And a grieving daughter takes matters into her own hands.
I did feel a need to help them investigate my mother's homicide.
If she didn't get the answers, then she kept asking.
In my gut, I just knew that was him.
Detectives investigating the vicious stabbing of 75-year-old Nina Whitney believe the killer stole her cell phone. Now, police have traced the phone to an address in South Kansas City and rush to apprehend the suspect.
We did kick his door in, and when we took the suspect into custody, we found that he had the phone on his person.
The suspect goes by the nickname Lil Mickey. Police demand to know how he came into possession of a murdered woman's cell phone.
He told us he was walking down the street pretty close to our victim's house and found that phone laying in the grass. He said he didn't make the most money in the world and was just glad to have a cell phone that was working and started using the cell phone.
Skeptical of his story, investigators ask him if he killed Nina Whitney.
Little Mickey adamantly denied being involved in any sort of violence with our victim or anything where someone was harmed or killed. We asked him, could you have bought this phone off somebody else? Did you get it from a person?
Despite hours of questioning, Lil Mickey stands by his story.
His story was, I found the phone there in the grass and picked it up.
Police want to know his whereabouts at the time of the murder.
Based on her lights being off in the house, we believe Nina's murder happened during daylight hours. And he did provide an alibi, a female that he had been with that day.
Investigators have no grounds to detain Little Mickey any longer, but they obtain a sample of his DNA just in case.
He wouldn't seem like he would have a motive to commit this type of crime, but we still had to do our due diligence.
The next day, police tracked down the woman he used as his alibi.
So we talked to her. The information she was able to provide, it matched up with what he had been saying.
With Little Mickey looking unlikely as the killer, detectives turned back to the theory that Nina knew her attacker.
It was obvious that she had let someone in the house because there was absolutely no forced entry.
We had to look at Nina's history and try to figure out who she would have let into the house. And we also had the witness that had seen a white male in the neighborhood. My supervisor thought the composite sketch would be a good thing to pursue in this case. The witness willingly came down to police headquarters and met with our sketch artist. She sat with him and gave a pretty good-looking composite sketch of what he believed the party looked like that he saw that day. We showed Paige that picture, and she looked at it for a long time, but didn't necessarily jog her memory about who it could possibly be.
The individual did not look familiar to me at all. I could not for the life of me think of anyone who fit that description.
Investigators can't be certain if the man seen by Nina's neighbor is the killer, but with few quality leads, police decide to release the sketch to the media.
I was the publisher and editor of the Cass County Democrat-Missourian. We all know that police sketches are an unexact science. However, I think they can be very useful. So we had run the sketch in the newspaper to put that sketch out to a larger audience.
As the sketch goes public, detectives work with Paige to come up with a list of people that Nina would have had a reason to let into her home.
She'd had quite a bit of work done on the house in the last year or so there had been lots of people in and out working on the house.
Maybe someone that is a predator did work inside her house and decided that she would be a good victim. Paige went back into Nina's home and went through all of her records to show us dates and times when she had stuff done at her house.
The detectives got all that information from me and questioned everyone who had been in and out of that house.
My squad started working to collect DNA from anyone that we thought had contact with Nina, and I think we collected about 40 to 50 samples. Honestly, most people were willing to provide their DNA to us when we explained that this was an elderly woman that was brutally murdered. If there was someone that maybe we thought was fishy or involved or could potentially be the suspect, DNA is good to rule people out in cases like this.
The forensics lab will compare the scores of samples to the DNA recovered from Nina's body.
It'd be nice as a detective to get DNA results like they do on TV, 5 seconds later, but it was about a month after the homicide when we got our results back. My boss called me and she said that we had a DNA hit. So I thought that, well, if there's a DNA hit, then we'll be able to find a suspect. But that wasn't the case because it was unknown DNA.
The DNA does not match the dozens of samples collected by homicide investigators.
Everything from the mailman to Little Mickey to contractors that had been inside her house, it rules them out absolutely. But the DNA profile that was found was a match to another murder almost 2 years to the day in Harrisonville, Missouri. So we knew at that point that this was not the first time that this suspect did this. And that wasn't something I expected. It was a big deal. What concerned us was that we did have a serial killer type situation.
One month after the murder of Nina Whitney, DNA taken from the crime scene as matched to another homicide in the national database.
It was a match to another unsolved murder in Harrisonville, Missouri. It's a smaller town about an hour south of Kansas City. Kara Jo Roberts was found inside her home in the bathtub, shot in the head with the bathtub running, just like Nina. It seemed like a sexually motivated homicide, and with the tub running, that matches Nina at our scene.
Police decide to keep this explosive new information under wraps.
At that point, we were trying to keep this information close to the chest because the suspect didn't know that we knew both crime scenes were connected. We did not want that in the public.
Detectives even withhold this new development from the victims' loved ones, including Paige.
I kept asking them, when is this going to be a cold case? And they kept telling me, well, not yet. We're not done yet. And I don't know what they were doing, but I know they were doing things behind the scenes.
Investigators head to Harrisonville to get briefed on the Kara Jo Roberts case.
Just reading through a case file doesn't give you the whole story. So to talk to an investigator that actually worked that case, it helps paint a better picture of what happened in the other investigation.
I was one of the detectives from Kansas City at the time that was sent to work on this case. Kara Jo and her husband lived right there in the small town. They had a kid. Seemed like a very happy relationship. Just your normal, happy family.
The Roberts family was devastated by a horrific tragedy on November 5th, 2008.
Her husband found Kara in the bathroom. She wasn't wearing any clothes. There were obvious gunshot injuries. She was in the bathtub, and the bathtub was running. There were zip ties that we speculated at the time had been used for bindings.
At the Kara Jo Roberts scene, we found 2 different white-colored zip ties that appear to have been used but cut. We also found a roll of duct tape. On both the zip ties and the duct tape, we had male DNA.
There was DNA found on Kara's body, and there was indications given by the medical examiner that she had been sexually assaulted.
Detectives investigating Nina's murder ask for a rundown of the suspects in Kara Jo's case.
Based on the fact of no forced entry, very much kind of angled towards us believing that the husband may have had something to do with this. A domestic violence type homicide is usually spur of the moment, rage and kind of action, but this could have been a situation where he was trying to control her physically with the bindings, and then it escalated.
Kara Jo's husband claimed he found his wife dead when he got home from work and immediately called 911.
From the time she was last seen to the time when her husband came home and found her was a very tight window. It was only like 45 minutes. Her husband gave what was kind of a complex alibi, but when we went to talk to his friends who were involved in that alibi, they were able to corroborate everything.
DNA testing at the time also cleared Kara Jo's husband, and no other viable suspects were identified. The investigation went cold until the DNA connection to Nina Whitney's murder revives the case 2 years later.
Nina's homicide was a lifeline to the Kara Jo Roberts case. We have double information, and we have a bigger picture of what's going on in both of these acts.
What we have to do at that point is start doing what's called victimology. You basically have to understand the circle of Kara Jo's world, and you look at the circle of Nina's world. You know these 2 cases are linked, and you want to find those commonalities in between.
What was really interesting was all the stuff in the Kara Jo Roberts case that matched up to Nina's case. As far as the tub running, we had a lot of different theories, but our main one was if our suspect was going to commit a rape, they would want to use that tub to wash away evidence after the act. In Nina's case, he turns on the water to try to maybe get her body up into the bathtub. He may have not been able to drag her body up those stairs. Our witness down the street sees this guy walking with a limp, and we thought the limp may have hindered him from getting her body back up to the tub. So just like our case, the Kara Jo Roberts case had someone down the street that saw someone in the neighborhood.
The witness had seen a Jeep, had seen a male going to the Jeep, and that male may have been limping.
And it looked like they were up to no good.
Despite the telling parallels, police can't find anyone connected to both Nina and Kara Jo.
That was not the answer that we wanted as detectives, because that meant that it was somebody totally random. A random person coming in and taking their life. That's like every person's nightmare.
In a case like this, where you know there's a suspect out there that could do this again, it makes it even more urgent to try to catch the person. So you're grasping at straws, looking for any leads, any information, any help you can get to try to solve a case like this.
You can only work with what information you've got coming in, and there wasn't any new information coming in at that point.
Running out of options, detectives turn to the one person who might be able to connect the two victims.
Detective Blank called me, and he said, "Paige, I have something to tell you." And what he told me was more horrifying than my mother's homicide. That scared the hell out of me.
Detectives investigating the stabbing death of Nina Whitney have informed her daughter Paige about a stunning development.
Detective Blank told me that there was a DNA match from the saliva they found on my mother's shirt to DNA that they found on Kara Roberts in Harrisonville. Kara had been raped, put in the bathtub, and then shot in the back of the head. The thought that we had a serial killer here in town is enough to cause panic for every female in this city.
We provided information from both crime scenes to Paige. And that's not something we would normally tell our victim's daughter. But in this case, Paige was a probation and parole officer. She is savvy in law enforcement, so we thought we could trust her with that information. We wanted to see if anything in her memory would be jogged to try to figure out if there's any common people, common locations that both victims would have known or gone to.
At the time, I thought it had to be someone who targeted my mother specifically. But when they showed me the evidence in Kara's case, there's just a million things to think about when you're trying to come up with a profile for someone like that.
There wasn't much there that seemed to be connected between the two victims. There wasn't an aha moment in that meeting at all.
It's been 5 months since the murder of Nina Whitney, and investigators are desperate for a break. They turn back to the composite sketch of the man with the limp seen close to Nina's house.
I wasn't necessarily a believer in the composite sketch thing. People make their own determination on whether they think the information they have is valuable to a case. They see that sketch and they decide, well, this guy's got glasses and the guy I know doesn't have glasses. And so the danger in that is that that person may have information, but that person may be turned off by the sketch.
We had run the sketch in the newspaper, but really that sketch hadn't brought in a lot of leads.
Despite their reservations, police hope that more people will see the sketch on billboards around the city, and someone will identify the suspect.
They were able to put that picture along 71 Highway, along with our tips hotline. The number of tips that we received on this case based on that sketch were not as numerous as you would think. All of them have to be followed up on, because there could be something there that you're going to miss if you don't take those tips seriously.
Weeks pass as investigators chase down leads that go nowhere. The lack of progress takes a heavy toll on Nina's family.
I was really angry that she died in her own home in that terror and that panic, helpless and alone and fighting for her life.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I think about my mother's last few minutes of life. I know the neighbor was home next door and nobody heard my mother screaming. I wake up to the sound of her screaming 2-3 o'clock every morning. It doesn't go away. It does not go away.
There's nothing worse than having to tell a family member, I'm sorry, there's no new information coming in, because they're frustrated. They're of the mindset that, why aren't you out there doing something?
At her wit's end, Paige summons the strength she learned from Nina growing up and takes it upon herself to search for the killer.
The investigation was not moving fast enough to make me happy, so I did feel a need to help them investigate my mother's homicide. I drove around the city and went to every antique shop, every flea market, every thrift store I could think of where she liked to shop.
She was looking for that white male walking with a limp and that black Jeep. And Paige was seeing black Jeeps like that everywhere.
I would take pictures of all the cars that looked like black Jeeps and all the license plates on those vehicles and forwarded all of those to the detectives.
Paige made it her job to be involved, and if she didn't get the answers, then she kept asking.
I can't even explain to you how badly I needed to know who murdered my mother.
Despite Paige's efforts, 6 months after her mother's death, the investigation starts to go cold.
Those kind of unsolved cases in Kansas City leave an entire metro area on edge. As the days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, how do you keep that case alive within the pages of your newspaper? Most of our weekly papers did not include an update because there was nothing to update in the case.
I kept thinking, this is going to be a cold case. I'm never going to figure it out. I'm never going to figure it out.
You always hope for them to get information to catch a suspect quickly, but I just couldn't fathom who would have done it. I had no suspects in mind.
I drove around and took pictures of the billboards because I wanted to make sure I got pictures of them before they had taken them down. But the sketch concerned me because I don't know if that description was accurate. I thought there's just so many questions that I will never have answers to.
Suddenly, 1 month later, Paige has a realization.
May 26, 2011, I was driving down 71 Highway in rush hour traffic, and I just happened to glance up and look at the lower half of the billboard, and I swear to you, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like lightning had come out of the sky and hit me in the head. It literally all fell into place as I'm driving down the highway.
Seven months after the murder of Nina Whitney, her daughter Paige has just been struck by a mind-blowing realization.
I was driving down 71 Highway, and I just happened to glance up at the billboard. Prior to that, when they showed me the sketch, the individual did not look familiar to me at all. I just focused on the lower half of his face and the chin, and it just an epiphany. It was Jeff. Jeff Moreland was a boyfriend that I had for 3 years while we were in college. We met in 1983 at Central Missouri State University, had a relationship for 3 years. Jeff and I met in a criminal justice class. He was as sweet and charming and funny as he could possibly be, and I truly fell head over heels in love with him. Once I got my graduate degree, I became a social worker, and Jeff went on to become a police officer. He loved being a police officer. That was his ideal dream job.
Paige and Jeff broke up after 3 years of dating, much to her mother's dismay.
My mother absolutely adored him. For years after we dated, my mother told me she wished I had married him. I know if he showed up on the doorstep, she would happily have let him in the house.
Could Paige's ex-boyfriend from 2 decades prior really be the sadistic serial killer detectives have been hunting for?
I was so lost in my own head, trying to tell myself that Jeff didn't do it. I kept trying to tell myself that I was wrong. But in my gut, I just knew that was him. At the parole office, I'd mentioned it to a couple of the girls that I worked with, and they told me that I should run him through the system. I said, well, that makes sense. So I ran Jeff through the system. And lo and behold, if he didn't have a black Jeep Wrangler registered in his name, and I nearly lost my cookies. And I also found out Jeff had been a police officer in the Grandview Police Department, but Jeff had retired about 5 years prior to my mother's homicide because he'd had Parkinson's.
Does the Parkinson's diagnosis mean Paige's ex could be the man with a limp spotted near Nina's home? Paige brings her findings to detectives.
I told him that Jeff had been a police officer in Grandview and gave him all the information that I had.
Officers look up Jeff Moreland's home address and discover he lives in the same small town as the first murder victim, Kara Jo Roberts.
He lived in Harrisonville, Missouri. So that was the first person during our investigation that matched all of those factors.
Detective Blank said, yep, it could be him.
Detectives know they have to take extra care when investigating an ex-cop.
Harrisonville is a very small community, and Detective Blank told me that Jeff knew every law enforcement officer in the county, and that he would find out that he was under investigation.
Investigators decide a direct approach is the best option.
We did not believe that we had probable cause at that point to get a search warrant to get his DNA. So we went down and knocked on his front door. I did tell him, your name's come up in a homicide and we need to get a DNA sample from you. If someone were to tell me that, I'd be like, what homicide are you talking about? That was not Mr. Moreland's reaction. He said, well, I've got to go take my cat to the vet. And he went back inside his house. My gut was telling me that we had our guy, but you need to be sure that this is your guy before you go with your gut.
Police again ask Jeff to provide a voluntary DNA sample.
I ended up calling him and telling him again that, hey, we need your DNA to compare to this homicide, and then we'll be done.
Jeff again claims that he's too busy to provide a sample. A week later, investigators receive an unexpected phone call from the police department Jeff retired from, located just outside Kansas City.
So the sergeant with Grandview Police Department calls us and says that he's been in contact with Jeff Moreland and he provided him a DNA sample. We rushed down there and we made contact with the sergeant. On his desk, he had a pill bottle.
The sergeant provides a strange account of how he obtained Jeff's DNA.
Jeff told him that, I want you to meet me at this gas station along 71 Highway. And Jeff shows up in his black Jeep. And Jeff tells him that Kansas City has come and accused him of being involved in a murder. As he's explaining the story, he takes swabs and puts them in his mouth. And then Jeff hands him this bottle along with my card and says, here, give this to the detectives. We tell the sergeant, that sample's not going to work. You can't just provide your own sample. And the sergeant sort of indicated, well, we'll just get rid of it in the trash then. We told him, no, we'll take that bottle off his hands and take that from him.
The evidentiary value of this stuff is just worthless. But obviously, we recover it and we examine it.
That DNA was tested, and it did not match our homicide.
The fact that that DNA came back as not a match just didn't surprise me at all. Had he followed protocol, that would have exonerated him. And he very easily could have done that, but he chose not to.
We more and more really thought that we might have had our suspect based on his actions at that point. We all know about serial killers. I was worried that the suspect was going to do this act again.
A few days later, detectives get the call they've been dreading.
I received a phone call. There was a rape that occurred in Harrisonville. But the victim was able to get away, and then she was able to contact police. The victim took the officers to where this event occurred the day before. It was Jeff Moreland's residence. So my first question is, where's Moreland at now?
When police go to arrest Jeff, he's nowhere to be found.
Detective Blank told me Jeff may have raped a third victim, and he is now on the run. I didn't know if he would be after me. I didn't know if maybe he had figured out that it was me who initially contacted the police. That was a nightmare.
Former police officer Jeff Moreland is the prime suspect in the murders of Kara Jo Roberts and Nina Whitney. Tragically, a third woman has now been attacked, but Jeff has disappeared, and investigators fear he may strike again.
When I heard that he had taken off, I was worried about Paige.
The detectives told me they truly did not know where he had gone or what he knew. I told Detective Blank he would probably find Jeff in Iowa near his family.
As Paige predicted, a trace on Jeff's cell phone leads police to a motel in Iowa.
He had taken a bunch of over-the-counter sleeping pills. He tried to take his own life and then ended up in the hospital in Des Moines.
Jeff survives the suicide attempt, and he is taken into custody by local police.
We headed up there to Iowa to get Mr. Moreland's DNA. We drove all the way back from Iowa with it. We wanted to be sure he wasn't going to get out of custody or bond out or whatever. And then the next morning, we got the DNA results back. We told Paige that his DNA matched both crime scenes. Jeff is, in fact, involved in the murders of Kara Jo and Nina.
It just blows my mind. And it was beyond all comprehension to me. This was 2010 when he murdered my mother. And Jeff and I split up in 1987. I had no idea what Jeff would become. The last time I actually saw Jeff was in 1994. He told me then that he periodically would patrol up and down my mother's street just to make sure that everything was okay. And at the time I thought, oh, that's so sweet. But now looking back on it, I just don't know.
Jeff Moreland is charged with the murders of Kara Jo Roberts and Nina Whitney and the sexual assault of the third victim. Soon after laying charges, investigators learn about the source of Jeff's phony DNA.
We were contacted by Jeff Moreland's ex-wife, and Jeff Moreland had a daughter with this ex-wife, and that daughter was engaged to someone. And that guy said that Jeff had called him out of the blue, and Jeff told him that he needed a sample of his DNA for a paternity test because someone was accusing Jeff of being the father of a kid. And so he provided a DNA sample and gave it to Jeff Moreland.
Then, Jeff tricked the Grandview police sergeant with some sleight of hand.
So the sergeant provided us a formal statement where he said he wasn't able to see Moreland's hands at all times when Moreland was taking a sample of his DNA.
Jeff's attempted deception backfires, only giving prosecutors more evidence against him.
There's nothing for the defense to attack. There's nothing to be argued because the physical evidence was just overwhelming.
I think it also says a lot that Jeffrey Moreland had 0 witnesses in his defense at the trial.
He got life without parole plus 50 years consecutive on Kara Roberts' homicide. And then he got 10 years for armed criminal action and 20 years for murder second on my mother's case to run concurrent.
With no trial testimony from Jeff, police and the victims' families are left to piece together exactly what happened to Nina Whitney and Kara Jo Roberts.
What we do know is that Jeff Moreland took Kara Jo's life. My personal opinion is he was driving by and saw her in the yard, and he was in that mode where he was hunting and decided that's his target.
After killing Kara Jo, it seems Jeff developed a taste for murder. He struck again 2 years later.
I believe the day that Nina was murdered, Jeff Moreland simply knocked on the door and Nina saw who it was and let him in the house. It's not necessarily uncommon for a predator to go after older women because they feel like they are easier victims.
Of course, my mother would let him in. And then at some point, he had to have started forcing her backwards up the stairs. I think when he got her into her bedroom, that he tried to rip her shirt off of her, forced her onto the bed, but she did fight back. She did run. My mother went running down the stairs. He chased her. He stabbed her 24 times. The kill shot was here through the throat.
At some point, he turns on the water to try to maybe get her body up into the bathtub to wash off his DNA.
But at that point, he knew with his Parkinson's acting up that there was no way he was going to be able to take her body back up 2 flights of stairs and put her in a bathtub. And then he went upstairs to clean the knife off, put the knife in the kitchen drawer, and went out through the sliding glass door.
Investigators believe that before he left, Moreland stole Nina's cell phone to throw police off his trail.
He has the presence of mind to grab that phone and throw that phone in the grass a quarter mile away from Nina's house. He knows that the investigator is going to be caught up in that phone as sort of a way to lead us away from him.
I did not know for 8 months who murdered my mother. The 8 months that I spent not knowing made me insane.
When you have families that do their investigations, sometimes it's not the best. But Paige being involved was actually good in this case because she was actually the person that found Jeff Moreland.
I can't even explain to you how grateful I am. Between my mother's neighbor and the sketch artist, I would have never figured it out. Never would have figured it out if it hadn't been for the two of them.
To call this an unexpected killer is almost an understatement. Jeff Moreland terrorized an entire community.
Police speculate that Jeff's forced retirement a few years before the murders may have been the catalyst that set him on the path to kill.
I feel that when he developed Parkinson's and he had his power taken away from him as a police officer, the murders were almost like him getting revenge on the world.
I joined this organization called Parents of Murdered Children and Other Survivors of Homicide Victims. And we're all basically going through the same thing. So it does help to have someone who understands the enormity of what has happened.
I think Nina would want to be remembered as a strong, independent woman who fought to the end. And that's how I'll always remember her.
There are frogs in the stores everywhere. You can't go anywhere without seeing cute little frogs somewhere. I think about my mother all the time when I see things that I know that she would appreciate, or when I hear country music. I think about her a lot.
College student.
She was literally the most innocent and genuine person I've ever known.
Viciously attacked in her own home.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I mean, this child went through hell. Who would have a reason to want to kill this girl?
Police are desperate to find the killer before he strikes again.
It's panic.
There is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have them.
But a dark trail of evidence.
He actually wound up weeping out of in a fetal position. This is bizarre. This is strange.
Leads them to a suspect.
This was someone hiding in plain sight.
They could have never imagined.
No one would have known that. Not anybody.
The city of Arlington is the home of 2 professional sports teams and a major amusement park.
There's something for everybody. And if you can't find something to do, then you've got a problem.
But in early April 1994, this idyllic community was rocked to its core.
911.
And it started when police received a 911 call from the Holly Park apartment complex.
911 325.
Woke up 3:30 in the morning, smelling smoke. I walk into my living room. There's so much smoke that I can't see. It's panic. There's a fire. We need to get out.
Residents quickly evacuate the building as firefighters arrive to battle the blaze.
You're totally helpless. You just sit there and watch everything go up in flames.
I still think about it. Just how close I came to dying.
Firefighters track the fire to its source, an apartment on the 2nd floor. Once inside, they make a horrific discovery.
Firefighters discovered a body in the bedroom. This was not just someone falling asleep in bed smoking. This was something more.
Homicide investigators are quickly summoned and try to make sense of the devastating scene.
I was informed of what the fire department had found and what they reported. We had a body inside of a burning home. Detective Stanton and I make entry into the apartment. The fire is out, but there's still a lot of damage. Virtually everything has got like a coating of this black, nasty soot.
Fire marshals could actually smell the gasoline and were able to see pour patterns. This was an intentionally set fire.
The trail of destruction leads all the way to the bed.
What I saw was just absolutely horrific. I've seen bad crime scenes, and I've seen crime scenes involving people that were burnt in fires. This was elevated. A young lady who you could see, even with the smoke damage and the burn damage, you could still see that this was a victim of a very brutal sexual assault. The body was laying on her back on the bed. The positioning is consistent with sexual assault. She had trauma to her face, as though she had been physically assaulted. Clearly there was a puncture mark in the middle of her chest. This child went through hell. It was like nothing I've ever seen. You know, who would do something as horrible as this? A lot of evidence was destroyed simply because of the fire damage. But we found what we believe might have been the murder weapon. There was a knife in the sink.
But fire damage to the knife has robbed investigators of the forensic evidence needed to link it to the killer.
Had that fire not been set, we probably would have latent prints. No telling what we would have had.
Investigators collect the knife for testing and manage to salvage some papers that survived the inferno. For detectives, the most important goal is to identify their victim.
We found out that apartment was in fact leased and occupied by one occupant, identified as Missy Gruball, 19-year-old college student from Burleson.
I can remember standing on the lawn, and I said, "There's Missy's car, but she's not out here with us. She was not accounted for."
So we had a general idea who our victim was, but that was not confirmed.
This body was so distorted that they had to use a forensic odontologist to confirm Missy as the victim.
Once we've identified the victim as Missy Gruball, we talked to her family in Burleson, and it's gut-wrenching. Missy's mother was devastated. I had a daughter myself. That sort of hits home.
As investigators meet with Missy's family, word of her death spreads through the small community.
When I heard the news, my heart just dropped. Missy was so innocent and so pure and such an honest soul. She was so much fun, very friendly, nurturing. She would have given anything to help anybody. She was literally the most genuine person I've ever known. We were very active in church, she and I both were. Missy was very strong in her faith, very moral. She was always the person to do the right thing, always.
In high school, her strength went beyond her faith.
Missy was very focused. She was a very hard worker. That's how she was so successful in school. She was in the high school band. She played the French horn, and she was amazing at it.
Even as a teenager, Missy had a clear vision of what she wanted and the drive to get it.
She wanted to go to the University of Texas at Arlington, and she wanted to get her own apartment. but she didn't want to burden her mother financially. So Missy was working to support herself to afford to be able to go to school.
But even though she wanted to stand on her own, Missy's heart stayed close to home.
She probably spoke with her mom every day on the phone. Missy and her mother were very close. They were a team in life and treasured each other.
You cannot describe the pain that Missy's mother went through. But I let her know, I really need you. You're going to help me find who did this to Missy, because she knew her daughter better than probably anybody.
Missy's mother tells detectives what she knows of Missy's activities on the last night of her life.
Well, Missy worked these late hours as a food server. She would always let her mother know that I'm home, I'm safe. On the night of Missy's murder, she'd call her mother late at night when she got home.
She finished her phone call with her mom and then dispatch getting a phone call that the apartment's on fire, establishing kind of a window as to when the actual murder would have occurred.
Police determined that Missy had been killed sometime between midnight and 3:30 a.m. It's not much for detectives to go on, but when they arrive back in Arlington, they have an unexpected lead waiting.
Once the victim's name had been released, one of our officers came forward and said, I took a report listing your victim.
A week prior to the death, Missy Grubal filed a police report on a guy that's staying with Missy who stole from her, and I'm thinking that very well could be our killer. We need to find this person. We need to talk to him. We need to get him in here as soon as possible.
Coming up, detectives track a dangerous suspect.
This individual made threats against her.
And soon uncover a lead they never expected.
It caught my attention immediately. Something is very suspicious here.
That puts them face to face with Missy's attacker.
I said, you killed Missy Grubal. Let's start talking about this.
Arlington police detectives are searching for the killer of Texas college student Missy Grubal. They've learned that the 19-year-old co-ed filed a police report a week before her death.
Missy had reported a co-worker took her tip jars, over $1,000 worth of tips.
Missy took the semester off in order to save more money, so all of her tip money was being hoarded so she could go back next semester to college.
The police report describes how Missy named a Charles Johnson as the potential thief, and that he had been staying with her before her money disappeared. Detectives speak to Missy's friends to find out more about Charles and his relationship to Missy.
Charles was a co-worker and apparently was someone that she thought was a friend of hers.
She socialized with co-workers, typically after work.
Young people she worked with, that's her crowd. Charles Johnson at that time, we are told, was homeless. And so Missy, being the very generous individual that she is, allows him to come stay with her. In fact, she even gave him a key to her apartment.
Missy was very kind-hearted, and I think that it was very easy for some people to take advantage of kind-hearted people.
Talking with her friends, there was a common theme about Missy. She was not only incredibly sweet, but incredibly naive, too pure to see the bad in people. As an investigator, and that scares me because I see someone who is easily victimized.
Only days after Charles moved in, Missy discovers she has been played.
Missy finds out one day that about $1,000 is gone from her tip jar. Well, the only person that could have done that was Charles Johnson.
Enraged, Missy confronts Charles about the theft and kicks him out of her home.
Something else that was very important from everything that I learned about Missy was she will also stand up for what's right. So Missy immediately calls the police.
Missy filed a police report, and a theft charge warrant was issued for Charles's arrest.
Here's some motive right here. This is retaliation for getting me in trouble. And so he's immediately on our radar. We want to see this guy. We want to talk to him. Problem is, we didn't know where he was at. It's hard to find somebody who was basically homeless, and we had detectives that were assigned to find him.
While police search for Johnson, Missy's autopsy report comes in. It confirms investigators' belief that the fire is not what killed her.
The autopsy findings demonstrated she was dead before the fire started. She should have inhaled some smoke. We should have seen some soot. We should have seen some carbon monoxide in her blood. That's not the case here at all. She had a bruise of her left eye and an injury on the brow ridge that would be consistent with being struck by a fist or another object. Injuries directed that show that the assailant wanted to feel in control and dominant. A fatal stab wound to the chest was the actual cause of death, but it went completely through her heart and damaged her left lung, and there was a massive internal bleeding.
The autopsy also confirms detectives' worst suspicions. The attack was sexual in nature.
She had been forcibly penetrated. This was a rape homicide by a very aggressive perpetrator.
Though the fire destroyed physical evidence at the scene, the medical examiner immediately notifies detectives of a major discovery.
We did a search of the body for any remnant evidence that wasn't destroyed by the fire. Semen was recovered that could be analyzed for DNA.
Forensic evidence and physical evidence is great. You've got to have it. It leads you to your killer. So that semen was a forensic link to the suspect.
The semen is sent for DNA analysis, hoping it will point to the killer. But detectives make a calculated decision not to make the information public.
The fact that she was sexually assaulted was not public. It was not released. And the reason for that is because it's what we call guilt knowledge evidence. And it's knowledge that is only known by the person who did the crime. You never reveal that because that can lead you to that suspect and to identify him. That's very powerful evidence.
Other evidence is piling up too. Among the documents collected from Missy's apartment, detectives discover a treasure trove of personal letters.
These were letters from someone named Ivan Villa. The nature of the letters indicated some type of relationship between this individual and Missy Grubaugh. We don't know if it was romantic or not, but some type of close personal relationship. So that's important. We needed to find out who this individual was.
Detectives do a background check on Ivan, and they're alarmed by what they uncover.
Ivan was a registered sex offender. And that just set the hairs on the back of my neck up.
Yeah, this is the sort of individual that we're looking for. Let's go find Ivan right away.
Detectives investigating the rape and murder of Missy Grubaugh have found letters in the victim's apartment that reveal she was having a relationship with Ivan Villa, a young man with a dark past.
He was, in fact, flagged as a sex offender. And so he's immediately on our radar because we know that Missy was sexually assaulted.
Detectives examine the letters between Missy and Ivan and discover that they had a tumultuous relationship.
The context of those letters looked like a conflict of two young adults trying to make something work in a relationship that is filled with confusion.
The conflict centered around how far Missy would allow the relationship to go physically.
Missy was very moral. It was an admirable thing in our faith to remain pure until we were married. It's something that Missy took very seriously.
The letters suggest that Ivan and Missy may have come too close to crossing the line.
Apparently, there might have been times where they went a little further than Missy was comfortable with. You could tell that she was upset about that.
Missy's friends knew that she was not one to back down under pressure.
If she felt like she was being taken advantage of, then she would stand up for herself, and I admired that about her so much.
Bottom line is, we need to bring Ivan in. We need to talk to him because he was, in fact, in some level of a relationship with Missy at the time of her death.
2 days after Missy's murder, detectives bring Ivan in for an interview. He claims that he and Missy were working through their issues in a kind and loving way.
Ivan told me that he cared for Missy, and he wanted a relationship with her. He certainly did want to have that relationship go a step further, but Missy was convicted to her beliefs and to her faith. They were also battling with the fact that he had this crime over his head.
Ivan tells detectives he was home alone asleep the night Missy was murdered.
That's not an acceptable alibi for myself or Detective Stanton.
But was it really possible this young man could have committed such a horrible crime?
When you start talking about the personality of who you're looking for, you got to be careful. If you start picturing this person as this evil predator, you may miss the actual killer. That's why you have to follow the evidence. The fact that we had semen from the crime scene means we have forensic evidence that would either connect him or exclude him.
Detectives ask Ivan to provide DNA samples. But until those test results are revealed, detectives do not have grounds to hold Ivan in custody.
In 1994, those tests usually took anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
While waiting for results on DNA tests for Ivan and searching for Missy's former coworker Charles Johnson, detectives continue their investigation by canvassing Missy's friends at the restaurant and learn something that adds another suspect to the list. Although this time, this suspect could be at the very top.
The name Jeffrey Smith came up. Her work associates told us that Jeffrey Smith was an employee there who Missy reported and got him in trouble at work. What we were being told is that really upset him and angered him.
Restaurant staff tell the detectives that Jeffrey had threatened to kill Missy during an outburst, and he was fired a few weeks later after getting into a fight with a manager.
What we are being told is this individual was hot-tempered, and he had made threats against her. So we're putting all of this together and thinking, yeah, we really need to talk to this guy.
But who could imagine a coworker committing such a horrendous crime? Detectives speak with another employee at the restaurant who knows Jeffrey well.
His girlfriend, Kristen, agreed to come in to speak with Detective Stanton and I.
Visibly nervous, Kristen paints a troubling picture of her boyfriend.
Kristen told us that they were living together, but she also shared that she was concerned with his personality. He was very volatile. She was afraid of him, and she did not feel safe being there with him. She was going to move out and move back with her parents in Denton.
But it wasn't just fear for what Jeffrey might do that was causing Kristen to leave him. It was a fear of what he'd already done.
What Kristen wanted us to know, and she was very open about it, was she actually suspected that Jeff was involved in the murder of Missy.
Detectives investigating the murder of 19-year-old Missy Gruba are interviewing Kristen Waller, a young woman who believes her boyfriend, Jeffrey Smith, could be the killer.
She just basically said, this is what my belief is. So I asked why. How did she formulate that? Kristen told us the night of Missy's murder, Jeff did not come to the apartment, and he didn't come back all night. So she didn't know where he was at. She also knew the conflict between her and him. So she's putting all this together, and she actually believed that Jeff was with Missy on that night and that he committed this crime.
Kristen gives detectives the phone number for where Jeff is staying. A background check shows the 22-year-old has no criminal history, but detectives are still suspicious.
We know that he had made some threats against Missy, and his whereabouts are unknown on the night of her death, so we needed to talk to him. I called Jeff Smith after speaking with Kristen, and he actually was cooperative and agreed to come to the police department.
In the interview room, detectives are struck by Jeff's demeanor.
Jeff Smith was smiling and nonchalant, just really not taking the entire situation that serious. I asked him, what was your relationship like with Missy Grubauer? His story was she was infatuated with him. And as a matter of fact, her infatuation is what created the problems and the conflict between him and Kristen. Kristen's telling us, no, I'm moving out because the guy scares me to death.
Jeff also has a conflicting account of his alibi.
He gave us this excuse that he was with Kristen. We already had information that he was not.
When detectives suggest Jeff is lying to them about his alibi, he laughs them off.
I've seen this type of personality before. He's narcissistic, he's cocky, he's arrogant. And I certainly wasn't going to take anything that he said at face value.
Despite their concerns about Jeff, detectives have no evidence to connect him to Missy's murder and are forced to let him go. But before he leaves, they ask him for a DNA sample. And to their surprise, he agrees.
He did give us the samples that we needed for forensic analysis that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
Then, 4 days after Missy's murder, Detective Lenore gets a frantic call from Kristen about Jeffrey Smith.
He had abducted Kristen earlier in the morning, physically abducted her and drove off with her from her parents' home in Denton.
Kristen tells Detective Lenore that Jeff was distraught and held her in an apartment for 8 hours, threatening to kill her if she tried to leave.
Kristen's telling us the motive was that Jeff just didn't want her to leave him. He released her safely a little later that day, but now she didn't know where he was at. She was definitely afraid of him. She'd contacted the Denton Police Department and ended up getting a warrant for his arrest for kidnapping. He became a fugitive. You've got this guy who is a loose cannon, and there was a level of urgency to find him. We put out a national broadcast along with that warrant that he is also a suspect in a murder investigation.
With Kristen safely at her parents' house and police in several states searching for Jeff, detectives in Arlington find their murder investigation in a holding pattern.
As far as Jeff Smith, we do have his hair, his blood, and his saliva for DNA that would certainly connect or exclude him from the murder.
DNA testing is still underway, but days later, investigators do get an important update from the lab.
They were able to type the blood from the semen, and they knew they were looking for someone with a certain type of blood.
Jeff did not match the blood type from the semen.
In addition to Jeffrey Smith, Ivan Villa is also ruled out because of his blood type, leaving Charles Johnson as the only active suspect for Missy's murder. And Charles is still at large.
That is incredibly frustrating because there is somebody capable of doing what they did to Missy out there, and we don't have it.
As the weeks pass with the case unsolved, Missy's family and friends grow more and more concerned.
It was very disheartening for a lot of us. We just watched the news and would hang on to anything that they would mention about it. It made all of us wonder why it happened to Missy. It was just devastating.
Then, a month into the investigation, detectives get a tip from an unexpected source.
I got a call out of the blue from Miss Grubauer. She wanted to let me know that she recalled a conversation that she had with Missy. It was so incredibly bizarre. And I just thought something is very suspicious here.
Detectives hunting the killer of college student Missy Grubauer have just received a lead that has turned up the heat on a case going cold. The victim's mother recalls a detail from the days just before Missy's death.
Missy's mom is providing information about how Missy had talked about this guy, Luis.
He was a 32-year-old man who had come over to the apartment, and the main thing that Mrs. Grubauer remembers is that he talked to her all night long till in the early morning hours, but then they got involved in a pillow fight.
At the time, Mrs. Grubauer thought little of the playful incident, but she suggests maybe Luis could help the investigation with information about Missy. Detectives have a different view.
This is bizarre. This is strange. The 32-year-old man had a pillow fight with her. It caught my attention immediately.
Investigators ask how Missy knew Luis.
Luis worked with Missy, and he lived at the Holly Park Apartments. She had done some babysitting for Luis's baby at the apartment complex.
Detectives' first stop? The restaurant where Missy and Luis both worked. Luis isn't there, but the manager tells them Luis is a model employee.
He was an Army veteran. I learned that about him. No criminal history. Matter of fact, management gave him an award for a heroic act. He actually stopped a robbery.
The detectives ask workers what they knew about Luis's relationship with Missy.
Co-workers described Luis as a friend. Sometimes after work, they might enjoy a beer together.
Detectives also hear something that catches them off guard.
A work associate relayed to us that Luis made the comment, and these were his words, is, "I hope they catch that son of a bitch that killed and raped Missy." The fact that she was sexually assaulted, no one should have known that. That was never released. He might have just been speculating, but the fact that it was said really, really alarmed me.
Investigators have uncovered yet another suspicious coworker in Missy's life, one that she saw every day. Detectives asked the manager for Luis's phone number.
Told him I was investigating the death of Missy Grubauer and that his name had surfaced from her babysitting his son, and Luis agreed to come see me. He was relaxed, he was polite, pleasant, regular, clean-cut guy. He told us that Missy used to babysit his son and that they worked together. So I told Luis what I want to do is exclude all of the known males to Missy so that I could find the guilty party. And the process in which I do that is I take samples, blood, hair, and saliva, compare it to the DNA and exclude them.
The request instantly changes Luis's mood.
His response immediately was, what are you talking about? Wasn't the evidence all burnt up? And I said, no, it wasn't. I've got significant incriminating evidence that was specifically left there by the suspect. Now his demeanor is changing, and you can see the concern in his face. I kind of even broke my own rule a little bit here, because a lot of times I don't like to give guilt knowledge information, but the fact that I knew that he had already said something about Missy being sexually assaulted, I went ahead and revealed to him whoever killed Missy sexually assaulted her, and I've got their semen. And Luis immediately says, I've got to go. I have to leave. And I have no legal right to keep him, regardless of what I believe. I just simply asked, Luis, are you going to give me your sample? He says, I got to get out of here. I got to leave. We'll do it Monday.
Monday comes and goes with no sign of Luis, but detectives don't let up.
I call him. He calls me back Tuesday. We make arrangements for Wednesday. Come Wednesday, he doesn't show up again.
Detective Lenore calls Luis at work, but gets some alarming news.
Management had informed us that the woman that he was living with at the time, his common-law wife, had called and said that he had to leave town. I called her. I said, I hear Luis is gone. You and I need to talk.
Jeanette has been living with Luis for 2 years. The couple moved into the Holly Park Apartments 6 months earlier.
They had been together long enough for them to have a child together. She was also pregnant with another child. But what was interesting is on the Monday that Luis was going to meet with me, which was about 3 days earlier, they got married. They got legally married. Well, in Texas, a wife cannot testify against her husband. I mean, those are my thoughts that are going on. I kind of kept that to myself and said, okay, that's interesting.
Jeanette knew Missy as a sweet girl who used to babysit her son and had been shocked to hear about her murder.
And so I asked if she recalls what occurred on the night of Missy's murder. She said Luis had gotten off work about 10:30 or 11 and informed her that he was going to have some drinks with some friends. Then he came in close to midnight, and then she heard him leave.
2 hours later, Jeanette hears Luis return.
She hears him come into the apartment and takes a shower and then leaves again. And then she hears him come back again. She notices that he's coughing and he smells of smoke. His story to her is that he was out jogging and he noticed that there was an apartment on fire, and so he went in there and that he saw this individual on a bed, and he said it was Missy, and he tried to do mouth to mouth, he said, but he couldn't do it, and he was overcome by smoke, and that he had to leave, and he came back. That's it, end of story. They just go to bed. Nobody calls 911. Nobody does anything. They go to sleep. I mean, the story is so bizarre, but she didn't question him. And I don't think she ever really saw it for what it was until she actually sits down and starts telling me. And as she's telling me, reality is setting in as far as what Luis might have done. She's pretty much stunned. I said, I need to go into your apartment. I need to get a search warrant.
Investigators descend on Luis and Jeanette's apartment, just a few buildings over from where Missy was killed.
One of the things that I wanted was his dog tags. Because he was in the Army, I wanted to know what his blood type was. And I wanted to know if the blood type from his dog tags matched the blood type from the semen.
The blood type matches that of Missy's attacker. It's the link detectives have been looking for, and enough to bring Luis in. But first, they'll need to find him.
So I got an arrest warrant for Luis. The next day, I get a teletype that the vehicle that Luis was in was found abandoned and burned in San Antonio.
Detectives believe they have finally uncovered the man who murdered Missy Grubaugh and set fire to her apartment. But Luis Arroyo has fled Arlington. His car found abandoned and set ablaze in San Antonio.
We don't know, but suspected there was evidence there, but the car was pretty much gone. I mean, it was burned up.
There's an urgency. We need to find this person as soon as possible.
Detective Lenore suspects Luis's wife, Jeanette, knows where he's hiding.
I told her that we realize you had nothing to do with this crime, but you can be a party by covering and by lying. So I said, you realize that when she was murdered, she was sexually assaulted. And when she heard that, you could see it upset her. It angered her.
Confronted with the full horror of what was done to Missy, Jeanette gives up Luis.
Jeanette gave me the address where he was staying in San Antonio. San Antonio Police Department went into the home and arrested Luis without incident.
Detectives Lenore and Stanton traveled to San Antonio to confront Luis Arroyo in person.
It is the most unique interrogation I've ever seen. I mean, Luis really had like a mental regression, and he actually wound up in a ball on the floor, weeping and kind of in a fetal position.
I don't know what he was doing. I just thought he wanted us to have some type of empathy for him.
When Luis finally tells his side of the story, it doesn't add up for detectives.
He did not admit to sexually assaulting Missy Grubo. He did admit, yes, I did have sexual intercourse with her. He said, we had consensual sex. I knew it was her first time, and I wanted it to be a very gentle and pleasant experience for her. That just sickened me. What happened to that young lady was anything but gentle and loving. It was brutal.
Faced with Luis's denial, Detective Lenore changes tactics.
I said, you killed Missy Grubo. All right, let's start talking about this. And he said, you know, I don't remember. I remember getting a knife. I think I did stab her.
Detectives are stunned. Is this the confession they've been waiting for?
I'm not going to call it a confession, because my definition of a confession is someone who says, this is what I did and I did everything, that you have evidence that they committed. Luis gave a statement with several admissions that included guilt knowledge information. Luis did not admit to setting the fire, but he recalls that there was a fire set. He gave us all of this incriminating information that clearly said it was him.
They have enough to charge Luis. But detectives want to make the case against him airtight.
Detective Santa and I got an evidentiary search warrant and collected his blood and his hair and saliva sample. He was, in fact, matched to the DNA from the sexual assault kit.
With Luis's statements, detectives can put together exactly what happened on the night Missy was murdered.
I believe he went there thinking he could convince her to have intercourse with him. His primary focus was to have sex with that young lady. Maybe initially he thought would be consensual, which it would never happen. So now he's mad at her, and then he took it to another level, physically abused her, sexually assaulted her, and then he killed her. After he killed Missy, he needed to destroy evidence, and that's when he made his decision to set fire to the apartment.
Lewis was charged with capital murder. Once we had the written statement, we had the statements from the wife. Pretty straightforward case.
As Luis awaits trial, detectives zero in on two former suspects in the case.
Charles Johnson was finally tracked down, and he was not even in the area at the time of the murder.
Jeffrey Smith was arrested and convicted of kidnapping his girlfriend, Kristen. He received a 4-year sentence. Luis Arroyo's trial lasts only 5 days.
We got a conviction rather quickly. And in Texas, once a person is convicted of capital murder with the death penalty waived, it's an automatic life sentence.
Although detectives have found their killer, the win is bittersweet.
He being in prison will never take away the pain, the horrific torture that child was put through. And him being in prison will never heal the wounds that the family has. They never recover. You can't bring Missy back. You just do what you got to do and make sure people pay for the crimes they commit.
Missy's mother is in a state of permanent grief. Missy's death did leave a very large void. Missy's life was taken way too soon, but it was a beautiful life. She was a beautiful soul, and she still is.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.